Are you able to hear me? Oh, I can't hear you. Turn the videos off.
You hear us now?
Oh, now I can hear you a bit.
Great, welcome.
Yes, hello.
Yes, all right.
I was having a little bit of panic.
Yep. If you can just introduce yourselves for the group here, and then we can proceed. Thank you.
Yes. Hello, I'm Stacey Williams with ISG. Thanks for having me here today. I'm here on behalf of the larger team of ISG, Impact 7G, and HR Green. We're working with the city, the Chamber, Creekside Pride, and the Quarter MPO on the Indian Creek Master Plan. I'm just going to provide a very brief update for you today. Welcome any questions or comments, or if you have follow-up afterwards, feel free to reach out to me or the city team. So just as a refresher, this is where we're at in the process. So we've been working with project partners for a while now. I've done a project website, got feedback from about 150 different folks within the community on what they'd like to see and the project goals for Indian Creek and kind of the larger corridor. And so where we're at now is we've worked and are working on draft concepts. Have presented those to Creekside Pride last week or 2 weeks ago, and also to the larger project team. Are working to update those and finalize those based on those findings. And then we'll schedule another public input session in likely in July and likely in tandem with another city event. With the goal of finalizing the report in late June, early July, at which time we'll present that finalized master plan to the council again, as well as other stakeholders. And so this is a snapshot of the 9 locations that we are looking at as part of this master planning process. And just we're looking at things, not only creek access, but also opportunities to better engage with the creek through educational opportunities, areas to kind of relax along the creek near the bike path, public art, tying in educational programming with the schools, water quality, flood resiliency, and then also other park amenities, kind of as part of this larger vision for connecting people to the creek and really incorporating it as part of the larger community and community amenities. So this is a snapshot of the 9 locations that we're looking at as part of this effort. All are on land currently held by the city of Marion. And so I'm not going to walk through all of these sites. I'm going to give you a couple high level snapshots for a few key sites. Site 1, which will be a trailhead site for not only the water-based recreation, but also for the land-based trail system that's going to go through there, which is that dotted blue line. And this will have creek access, primitive signage, parking, likely take advantage of the dark gray triangular piece of land that the city currently holds to as well for some park programming and other facilities. And go ahead. We're gonna skip ahead to site 3, please. And so site 3 is another one of the showstopper sites. This is near the schools. It's a large city-held property that we really see as one that can serve multiple purposes. Right now, there's a lot of stormwater, which you can see draining through the site. It's creating its own channel. And so what we're really looking to do here is provide a restored habitat and a treatment wetland, so that we'll be treating that stormwater that's flowing off the streets and flowing from the neighborhood and treat it before it makes its way into the creek. That will help improve water quality. It also enhances flood resiliency, and then really tying programming into the educational opportunities and making this kind of an outdoor classroom for the community, while also adding aesthetic value and a recreational amenity, and then also providing connections to the creek. If you skip ahead one slide, here are a couple of just high-level site plans of what that could look like. And then if you skip ahead one more, it'll show a draft perspective. So we're looking at kind of connecting that trail system and those educational programming through a series of boardwalks that will connect the site. And they will all be designed to be floodable infrastructure. Really, we see this as one of the sites that will really be a key kind of connection point for the community, but also one of the showstopper sites as part of this larger effort. If you'd skip ahead to site 6, please. And then for site 6, one of the things that we heard from the community is that they really wanted some opportunities for fishing. And so for this site, we see opportunity in the gray area just on the north side of the creek to create an accessible pond or an ADA accessible fishing area for the community. And so having a fishing dock that's accessible for folks with varying ability levels and mobility levels that will connect to the existing park programming, but then also to this area. And if you skip ahead two slides, that'll show what that could look like. And so for all of these, the details are still being finalized and figured out, but we have we've done preliminary feasibility to determine what's possible, sizing, and those types of pieces, and then now we're digging into more of the specifics for those preferred concepts. Chris, to site 7. And so for site 7, this is at Thomas Park. We again see this as one of those areas that will be a key focus of investment and also bringing people to the area. This is already a well-loved park with different programming. There's the new elementary school going in across the creek, the bike trail that goes along the creek here. And so what we're looking to do is enhance that experience with a series of not only creek access points, but also some in-stream features that will provide a little bit of an excitement factor. There's not enough flow to get a big whitewater feature, but enough flow to be able to do something in stream that will give a bit of that excitement and have some ripples that flow through. So we're thinking about this site as kind of a circuit where folks might hop in at A, float through and then do the loop again, or for those that want to paddle straight through, they can do that as well. As part of that, that also helps will narrow up the channel and allow for a little bit more consistent current. It also helps with bank stabilization and doing and tying with the bank work that would be proposed. And studies show that for every one person in the water, there's 8 or 9 people just hanging out watching. So that's another key point of focus here, is providing those opportunities for people to just get down closer to the water and relax with the different seating, some limestone seating, maybe an outdoor kind of area in the center where there'd be for some more formalized seating, where it could also couple for smaller events. So again, we see this as one of the real draws for the larger system and tying into existing programming. And then so these are a couple of different options of what that might look like. Again, if you'll notice in option A, not an outdoor amphitheater, but kind of an outdoor seating area that could also have some smaller events. And then the precedent images that were sent to council along with this presentation, there's some options of what that could potentially look like. And then for sake of time, crew will go on to site 9. And so this is the last spot within the city of Marion. And again, there's a pretty significant amount of city held property at this site. This will be the last formal takeout point. So we're really thinking about people that will be ending their trip here. So we want to have some open air shelters for picnic facilities. We want to connect some of the facilities to the city held properties that are across the street. So tie in some park programming and other facilities as part of the larger vision for not only the on-water recreational components, but tie in other programming on the city held properties as well. And so they'll be serving dual purposes. So for not only the on-water recreational users, but other visitors to the site for picnicking and hanging out, having a sandwich after you get off the water, needing to fill up your water bottle, use the restroom, that type of thing. And then also thinking about what some playground or more traditional park programming might look like for this area as well. I know I went through that really quickly, but wanted to leave time for any questions that you might have of me. Again, we're working to revise concepts, make edits based on the feedback that we have received thus far, which will then be shared with the community and the Creekside Pride team in the coming weeks.
Thank you. Are you open for questions? Does anyone have questions? Yep, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, Stacy, I got 2 questions. Can you just talk about the water flow level between site number 1 and from site 1 to site 9? What is the average depth of water? And then what is the distance as well from site 1 to site 9?
So I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, we did do a center line stream for the distance. It's a fair distance. I believe it's 7 or 8 miles from site 1 to site 9.
Okay.
But I'd have to go back and double check that with all of the meanders. We tried to provide different segments. So some of the sites I skipped over do have access points. So we have a couple that are a bit longer and then a couple that are a bit shorter. So folks that can have varying experiences. And then with water depth, that, as you know, it fluctuates pretty dramatically. Some of the things we're looking at are in some of those spots where we're directing people to do some of those in-stream features, which will help give a bit more consistent flows but we know that, you know, August, September, sometimes there's not a lot of water. But so very variable water levels in the creek. We were out there last June and water levels, I mean, in some spots were only a few inches and we could still most of the way paddle. There were a couple spots that we needed to get out and board in. But also part of what we'll look at with the team is where we may need to do some strategic debris clearing also as part of that. Can't control water levels, but can control a bit, you know, where there's some of those other things blocking the way or making it more difficult paddle. But part of what we're also looking at is just how to better connect existing amenities to the creek so that when are those times where it might not be floatable, we can still take advantage and creek walk and come down and hang out by the water and take advantage of it in different ways.
So one more quick question. Is there planning to be done? It sounds like most of the planning is exterior to the creek itself. Is there planning to be done on the creek itself to provide better or deeper channels or more consistent channels? Or just take the creek as it is?
We're looking at, and that's part of the piece that we're still exploring. There are locations where we're looking at adding and doing bank improvements and some in-stream habitat, which helps create those deeper pools, or a series of different veins and things that will help tighten up and give you that deeper, a little bit directive flow to the center of the creek, which helps get a bit more depth in those locations rather than having it spread out.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Well, thank you very much for the presentation. I want to acknowledge all the people who have been working on this for some time, and especially Todd and Will, who's chairing the committee. Todd's been working on this for a number of years. Maybe was it 8 or 9 years ago? We canoed down the creek just to prove that it could be done. And the creek kind of goes to the community, but most people know it's there, but really don't have access to it, haven't really been near it. And really anywhere you go in the world, any body of water, however small or large, that's where the activity is. That's where people are relaxing. That's where the recreation is next to the water. People like to be next to water. So I think this is a really important and exciting project because it takes something that has been kind of viewed as a liability in our community. It floods every once in a while. It just sort of goes through the community. It makes it into an asset and into an amenity that people will enjoy. I think if you look closely at the details, the limestone steps and walkways that allow people to get down near the water, even if you're not able to get in the water. I mean, it's exciting that we're going to have activities that allow people to be in the water, but even just being down near the water and that view of Marion through the creek is really the most beautiful view of Marion. So I think this is a worthwhile project. I appreciate everyone's time spent on it, and it'll be exciting to see where it goes from here. So thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, Will or Todd, do you have anything to add to this before we move on? Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on with the consent agenda. The first item that's marked is A6. Any items prior to that anyone would like to discuss? All right, then we'll go with A6.
City Hall will be used as a polling location for the June 7th primaries. This is also the same night as a council work session. So this item's worded to move the meeting to Monday, June 6th. The other option would be to combine the work session with the regular session on that Thursday. Wondering if council has a preference. We've done both in the past, so.
So well, does staff have a preference? A recommendation?
We've done them both.
Yeah. Okay.
It's
Any
whichever.
particular preference up here
Have a Creekside Pride meeting that night, but.
on Monday? Well,
Either way.
when we've done a combined meeting, has that been okay with everyone? Does anyone object to having a combined meeting on Thursday? Is that any objections from staff?
Nope, we've done it several times, so it's doable.
Okay, you think that works well that way?
Yep.
Okay. I think we have a consensus. I think no one's objecting to having the combined meeting on Thursday.
Okay, so this will be changed then to combine the meetings instead of moving it to Monday.
Okay,
Okay.
perfect. All right, A7 through B2, any questions or concerns or clarifications? Just to reiterate for council, that the intent of the work session is, this is when we ask our questions and become informed. The intent of Thursday is really to debate among council members and vote. So I'd like to encourage us to bring out whatever questions we have on Tuesday. I mean, it's okay to have questions on Thursday. It's never wrong to have a question. But the intent of today, the Tuesday meeting, is to really dig into the details and ask the questions and understand what's coming up on Thursday. So any questions on A7 through B2? All right, then C1. Welcome.
Good evening.
Hello.
Cale McBurney, Battalion Chief of Training with the Marion Fire Department. Basically wanted to talk to you about the asset replacement purchase of our thermal imaging cameras. Just a reminder for everybody, the thermal imaging camera is a tool that we use on our first line engines where crews take into a house. It's basically the camera that we utilize to basically see through the smoke. So if there's victims within the residence or the building that we're searching, we're able to see them a lot better, as well as that allows our crews to be able to see the seat of the fire. If it's kind of hidden on us, you're able to pick out that heat signature a little bit quicker, so that you're able to get to that spot faster and get the job done. We also utilize the thermal imaging camera for our incident commanders, or that first arriving officer on the engine, or our battalion chiefs. They get out of the vehicle, they do their initial walk around the structure, and they can utilize that to help find the hot spot, which again helps us narrow our direction as to where we're going to find the seat of the fire. A couple other things that we use the cameras for is hazmat operations. When we have a liquid vessel, a liquid holding vessel, there is the dead airspace in it, and the thermal imaging cameras can allow us to see that difference in temperature between the liquid and the dead airspace. We also utilize them for search and rescue. If we have somebody lost or missing out, if we can utilize that for that, or on car accidents, if there's a potential that somebody has been thrown from a vehicle, and we can use that to kind of help quick scan the area. So we're looking to replace 4 thermal imagers. There would be 3 on each of our frontline engines, and then 1 with our battalion chief vehicle. They go on any major incident. So, and a lot of times they can arrive first because they're in a smaller vehicle, and they can get out and start utilizing that. So Lieutenant Hoover was assigned to do the research on these thermal imaging cameras. He went through, did all the legwork with them, established a set of specs and put that together, and then sent that out to bid. We went out to bid to 4 different companies. And of those 4 companies, we only had 1 that actually returned that actually fully met our spec. So basically, we had initially, when in asset replacement, had budgeted for $44,000 to replace these thermal imaging cameras. With the work that Lieutenant Hoover did, we were able to get a per unit cost of about $6,450 for each camera. That included a $1,000 trade-in value for our old thermal imagers. We did add what they refer to as a thermal throttle to the camera for about $350, that when a crew's in searching after the fire's out, one of the big things is trying to find those hot spots so that we avoid rekindles. The thermal throttle is one that you can walk into the room, you hit the button, and it will isolate that view onto the hottest spot in that room, so they can get in there a little bit quicker, find those hot spots, and hopefully avoid any potential rekins. So with the $6,450 for 4 of them, that puts us at about $25,800. We put in and requesting $26,400 to cover any potential shipping costs that, may not have been figured into that. So with what he did, the work he did, we're able to be close to $18,000 under what we had originally budgeted for the asset replacement for these 4 cameras. So do you have any questions? I've got more information if you want it, but we probably don't have all
I
night
would
for me to
bet
sit
that
here and explain
Grant
it to
has a
you.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this item caught my interest. I would just tell you. So I am curious. What can you describe what there was about the digital video recorder and the digital zoom that it isn't useful in your application?
The digital video, we had that on the old ones, and it just really was not a feature that was getting used. And the camera part of it, because these are the old ones, you could hit a button and it would record a picture, but it wasn't a feature that it just wasn't used. A lot of times when you're in there doing that, you don't have time to sit there and go through all the functions and find all the bells and whistles. We got a job to do. We want to get the job done, and we just need a camera to go in and do what we need to do.
Okay,
So,
that makes perfect sense.
yep.
Thanks.
So, I mean, I can obviously see the necessity of the thermal imaging that you're talking about, but a little related question. Does the fire department have a drone?
Mhm.
Does it have thermal imaging capabilities?
It does have some thermal imaging capabilities. The issue with that is getting it deployed quick enough on a fire scene. And then you can't take it inside.
Oh, I'm thinking even like search
A
and rescue,
yep,
search, trying to find somebody that's
it is,
lost.
yep.
different aspects like that.
That is something that if we are in a regular, that will get used.
Okay,
And
so,
that will be put up by our members that are trained to fly. But these cameras can be handheld, they're handheld, and the
right.
crews that are out doing the ground search can just utilize them to kind of help.
yeah, I thought you had a drone. I just wanted
Yep,
to confirm
yep,
that. for
But
my-
it's kind of, it's the same thing, but 2 different applications.
Right, exactly. All right,
Yep.
perfect. Thank you.
Okay,
Anything else?
I think, Will, did you have something? No?
I guess I don't really know what thermal imaging is. Is that like in the movie Predator, his eyesight?
Is
that what thermal imaging is?
It is, what it does is
His
the
vision?
thermal imaging camera picks up the different heat signatures.
So like what we see in movies
Yep.
and where the,
It's,
Yeah.
similar to that. It's
Okay.
not a real camera where you're taking pictures with it and it shows that thermal difference in the air. So, and a lot of them are colored so that it starts out kind of a black and white. But then as you get into a much hotter environment, that will turn into a more of a yellow, then into a red. Just kind of help. It does have a temperature gauge on it. So you can pinpoint, find out exactly what that temperature is that you're looking at.
are they like a handheld gun or something that you?
Yep, it's
gun,
just
like
a
a
little,
radar type thing?
it's just a little handheld thing that you can
Hold it
hold in
up.
one hand, hold it up here, take a look. And when you're crawling around or doing other activities, it's got a lanyard that allows you to just kind of hang it there, and then you pull it up and look when you need it.
Interesting.
We haven't quite got to the future of everything being the heads up display in our SCBA mask yet, but that's coming eventually.
Next budget season, huh?
Yeah.
Once the Chiefs retired, then we can get
Maybe,
those, right?
maybe the next budget cycle, when these are due for asset replacement, we might have something different then.
Grant would be in favor of those, I'm sure. Thank you.
I think it's great that it came in under the budgeted amount.
Yep.
That's important. So thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you for your time.
Okay. Items D1 through E2 are not marked. Any questions on those? Not then F1. Is that Tom?
I just wanted to let the council know that we, as stated, we're setting the date. We'll do a presentation on the full document before we go to the public hearing at the next meeting. There were some tweaks that came out of P&Z, and so we'll incorporate those into that conversation. We're not prepared to do a full report today, but I just thought I'd let the council know that.
Okay, any questions on that? So we'll have a presentation on it forthcoming. Okay. All right, then we'll go to G1 through F3. Any discussion or questions, concerns? If not, we'll move on to A1 under regular agenda.
Thank you, Your Honor. A1 is in regards to the GO Bond Series 2022A that you have heard a lot about, as it is always a long process when you do general obligation bonds. Really just wanted to provide a brief update on where we're at with that process and what you can expect going into Thursday. Since we last met, the last meeting that you had approved related to the GO Bond Series was approving the preliminary sale analysis that has actually been released. You also saw in the news that the city did our Moody's credit rating and did receive the AA1. Yesterday, I did go over a review of comparable sales with historical data with our financial advisor. Today, we are continuing to monitor that just to see what's going on in the market. And so we did discuss market and expected spreads today. Tomorrow, we will be meeting to agree upon the revised structure and will incorporate the proposed spreads. On Thursday, the underwriter will begin taking orders for the bonds, and we expect the pricing to be finalized around 11:30 a.m., pending City Council's approval that evening. The financial advisor and underwriter, meaning Tiana Pooler with Independent Public Advisors and Michael Maloney from DA Davidson, should be here Thursday to present. And then closing is still on schedule for May 10th. And the other thing I should probably add, you would have noticed that we did not include the purchase agreement in the council packet last week. I just received a draft on Monday, and there's been a little bit of back and forth as we work on the terms, but that will be in the packet for Thursday without the pricing details.
Okay. Kudos on the AA1 bond rating. I think, it's as I said to the council, I consider that to be an anchor for everything that we're doing. So great job and to everyone in maintaining that. Any questions for Leanne? Okay, no questions. Thanks, Leanne. All right, we'll go on to public services. We have one item marked there, B1.
Yes, Your Honor and Council, this is a motion to approve the roof replacement package for our existing maintenance facility. Right now, we're going to approach this with two different options. Moving forward, we're going to bid out a replacement of the standing seam roof the way it is. And then we're also going to bid out an alternate design that includes a membrane that would cover the existing roof structure. The advantage to doing that, it would cost less, plus it would be faster, and it would allow us to keep utilizing the facility while the roof repairs were being completed. The warranties are the same between the both materials. And so we're looking at bidding out both options. The way we have it scheduled that bids would be let on April 22nd. They would be due May 12th. We'd have a public hearing scheduled for the 19th of May. We have the project calendar is programmed at 150 days to complete with late penalties at $250 per day.
Steve.
Yeah, so there's quite a spread between the project budget of 780,000 and the alternate for 370,000. Can you remind us how much of this is going to be covered by insurance and what the future plans once the new building is completed, what we're maybe thinking about for using this site that may affect maybe what direction we move in?
Yep. And so the reason why there's such a spread is the price of steel right now. To procure standing seam roof is, there's a long lead time, and
Mhm.
plus it's very expensive at this point. A membrane roof is kind of a vinyl membrane. There's a lot more material available to us right now. Collins Aerospace has gone to this option and has had great success up to this point. In terms of insurance coverage, let's just say remains to be seen. They gave us an estimated roof repair allowance of $165,000. And so as we put this project together, we have those line item details completed. We'll submit that to insurance for their review. And so in terms of the reuse of the public services facility, right now, it's gonna be sometime before we have a new facility. With that, we are looking at keeping the facility and potentially working out a lease with some interested parties at this point. That could change,
Right.
but we see no reason to put it on the market at this point.
All right.
So,
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thanks, Ryan. Public services, I'm sorry, that was public services. The next is parks. D1 is Mark. Thank you. Go ahead.
Yes, so we have two ADA lists for our current pool that reach its end of life. And these are things that are necessary according to federal code that we need to have ADA access into the pools. And so these are replacements for these items. It wasn't planned. And so unfortunately, this is something that we have to do. If we're caught not having these ADA accesses, it would be a much greater fine. But in what you'll see in the two quotes is we have two different models for those. And the reason is because the way the pool is designed, for the larger pool, we have wider gutters. And so we have to have a longer arm to reach through those gutters. And so that's why you see two different models on there.
So are the ones we have not operational, or they're just?
They're not
best fit?
operational. We were looking at maybe replacing one of the motors, but that wasn't a feasible option.
Well, my question is, are you concerned about like supply issues in getting these, or are they available?
They're available. So
Okay, good.
the only thing that they're gonna do is customize the base plate for us, but they'll be shipping within 11 days.
Okay. Good. Sounds good. Go ahead, Grant.
Seth, so what I'm interested in, and I certainly understand the necessity to get these chair lifts in place. I am somewhat interested in terms of just generally your expectation now for remaining life on the existing pool versus the other topic we'll cover here later.
There's going to be a balance of that. I mean, the good thing is some of these chair lifts can be utilized at the or if we're going to be building a new pool, it won't necessarily be necessary for the new pool because there's going to be ADA access that we're looking at for zero entry and things of that nature. And so that's where we're kind of finding the balance of replacement and where we can kind of crutch things along. And this was an item we're hoping to crutch along, but it just didn't happen.
Sure. What do you think remaining life on the current pool is? Guessing. I know it's a guess.
Hopefully 5 to 6 years is what we're hoping for. So we've had tremendous repairs this year, and we'll probably have tremendous repairs in the coming years too.
Okay. Thanks.
Yes, go ahead, Will.
I was at the park board meeting when this was discussed, and Seth, I think you should let everyone know what the fine actually is instead of saying it's a large fine. How much is the fine if we didn't have?
Well, I believe Carlene said it was close to 100,000 for a
Probably a
fine.
good idea to buy
150,000.
So probably a good idea to buy a couple of chairs instead of getting fined $150,000 per chair. Oh, geez. Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions? I think we know what the vote's gonna be. All right. Next is engineering. Mike, I'm kind of disappointed. You didn't have all your items marked this time, and Tom does. You let Tom.
I decided I would give you guys a little bit of a break for me and let Tom take over for a while. So we'll have a public hearing on Thursday regarding the sanitary manhole project. So this is the project where we actually remove the brick manhole and replace with a new concrete manhole. We had 4 bids on this. There's a detailed bid package in your council packet. BJ Brecky was the low bid at $76,978, and we are recommending moving forward with them.
Questions? We should go back and see if there are any questions on E1 through E3, just in case. You have a question on E4, Sarah? Go ahead.
That's a big difference when we're talking about gaps too. Between the lowest bid and the top bid, over 100, over double.
Yep. So the RNG 10 Capital is someone who's never bid a project in Marion before. They also bid the project we're going to talk about next. And again, you'll see they were awfully high. So I don't know if that's how they do work in their state, but they're not an Iowa company. So
it was the exact same work.
yes.
Yeah, so since this bid came in under our estimate, is there any chance we should consider adding another manhole or two to get a little more done this year if
Yeah,
we've
so
got it
we-
budgeted?
So we will always look at that. First, we have to get the contract here before we can do that.
Okay.
But we will, so our dollars, I believe it's $350,000. I'd have to double check to make sure, but that's split between 3 projects. So the project
Okay.
we're talking about today, the project we're about to talk about, and the slip lining
Slip
that's
lining.
out for bid right now. So between those 3, we will allocate as much of that money as we possibly can.
Perfect, thank you.
Yep.
Good memory. Okay, any other questions on E4? Any questions on E1 through E3 before we move on? All right, next one, Mike.
So this is the new project that we decided to try out. So this is leaving the existing manhole in place, the brick manhole, and then pouring a liner inside of it. So there you can see there's quite a bit of difference between the 2 bids. Again, the second bid is from an out-of-state contractor. So the low bid came in from HydroClean at $39,482.68. We only did receive the 2 bids. Again, you have a detailed bid package in your council packet, and we are recommending proceeding with HydroClean.
Questions? Go ahead, Will.
Do you think only 2 bids because it's something new and maybe the others don't know how to do this type of project, or?
There's not as many that do it. There were some that wanted to modify our specifications and do basically a shotcrete program that we don't really want to do. We want to have that nice smooth inside. So in the future, but again, this is
Not that I'm complaining about the bid is low, so.
right.
But just
And
curious.
just so you know, typically, this was, I think, half the price or less than remove and replace. So it's something we're going to try out and see how it works.
How many are you doing compared to the other one?
I'd have to look at the plans, but
Similar amount?
yeah.
Okay.
Will?
What?
Oh, I'm sorry. Grant?
We're mostly interchangeable. Mike, I guess just kind of on the theme of your comments about RNG 10 Capital, maybe not experienced in the state, hence that's driving their high bid amounts. What's the experience base for HydroClean on doing this kind of work? Are they pretty experienced, or are they new to the technology, if you will?
So they have done it for like Des Moines Metro. We have never done this project before, so we do not have personal experience with them doing this product. HydroClean has done the slip lining type projects for us, but not a concrete project like this. So again, we're kind of broadening our horizons here. So
Yeah, good, thanks.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you, Mike. On to community development. Good afternoon.
Afternoon, Mr. Mayor and Council. we're going to have a public hearing regarding the updates to our housing plan and our code of fees, table of fees. Starters, we sent out 570 postcards to every landlord that has property in the city of Marion. That was something we wanted to do to make sure that everybody knew what we were going to do. So far, we've only had a few comments come back. Most of them are okay. Nobody was really against it, so we're kind of glad there. As of the end of March, we had 4,538 units that we inspect every 2 years. That's 1,481 different addresses that we have to go to in the city of Marion. We anticipate another 326 over the next year, maybe a little over a year. And looking forward from there, there's quite a few more that are still on the horizon. So we currently do this with one admin person and one inspector. We do have a software we use, which is a little bit of a hindrance. So that's really a story for a later time, but we are looking into some different software that we think will probably help us out and make things a little easier. And the next slide, there you go. So why do we do the inspections? Well, for starters, it's mandated by the state. We have a housing program in the city of Marion. We're over 15,000 people. So that's one of the reasons. Public safety and compliance is another reason. We have a housing program designed for safety of the residents that live in them. We do it for fire prevention through inspections for electrical systems and smoke detection. It's one of the things that we really look for is make sure that the smoke alarms are all working. Make sure the electrical is not a fire hazard. There's other things like sanitary health hazards caused by maybe leaking roofs or leaking pipes or windows, that kind of thing. So, and we do look into that too, if we see that when we're in the site. We also look for hazards due to dilapidated buildings. It could be a deck, it could be a porch, it could be something inside. We just want the people living in a safe property. We also do it with complaints. We have a few complaints over the year. I can't tell you how many because our software doesn't track it right now. So that's something that we're kind of looking into, maybe figuring out how we can track that a little better. And the next slide, Terrell. So really what we're doing, the reason for some of these changes is we have a 25% or just about a 25% no-show. So what a no-show is we've scheduled the inspection and either the landlord calls us a day or two ahead of time and says they can't make it, or they just don't show up when we get there. So we have an inspector scheduled and he can't go do his inspection. So we have to reschedule it and try and figure out when we can do it. So that's one of the things. We're hoping that some of this will change, will help that. We also have landlords that are putting off getting their properties fixed. They'll put it off for 30 days. We'll get after them, put it off for another 30 days. It's just one of those things they just keep putting it off. So we're also hoping that this will help that. So some of the specific changes, a lot of it is we're pulling things out that really did not pertain to the, or not solely pertain to the housing. Some of it is in our nuisance code. So we're currently working on trying to rewrite the nuisance code, the ordinance. There's a few things that we'll put in there that are in the housing so that it will still be there, still be enforceable. So that's not a real problem. We are changing the landlord permit to a license. Probably not a big deal, but it just works better with our software that we currently have. Everything is under licensing, and so we thought, well, let's just make it a license. We're changing some of the wording in there, the language in there, to make it a little more enforceable, a little clearer to the landlords as to what happens if they don't comply with the inspections, if they put us off, if they put us out there. We wanted it a little clearer. We also changed the number of inspections before it goes to municipal infraction. We went to 3 from 4. Because when you think about it, a lot of times we give them 30 days for the first one. We go back, and if they haven't got it done, we Maybe give them another 2 weeks or maybe another 30 days if we're really generous. Before long, we've got 60 to 90 days that we're out there. So if we go 4 inspections, then we're probably looking at least 90 days, if not more. So this is 90 days that the public that are living in these apartments, the citizens are not getting what they deserve. So we're trying to eliminate some of that. We've added a few things like we're doing certified mail on second mailings and third mailings so that we make sure that the landlords are getting them, that are signing for them. We are charging fees for the certified mail fees to them. We've changed a little of the wording on some of the complaints. And we're stating now that if we talk to somebody on the phone, if we're verbally communicating with somebody, we do send a notice in writing via email generally if we have one, or it will be snail mail if we don't. So we are trying to make sure that we're covering all of our bases, making everything much more enforceable. And then we have added that we were sharing information between building, fire, and PD. So if we get out there and we have an enforcement on a rental housing, and maybe some of it is something police takes care of, we're trying to do it as a group, as an organization, as opposed to each entity doing their own thing. So we're trying to work together on that. Have the next slide, Terrell. So really, we're not changing the fees a ton. We are adding past due fees. So if they're not paying their bill on time, we are adding a fee to that, just like anybody else. If you don't pay it, you get charged a fee. We're stating that we're not, if it's not paid after 90 days, we're trying to be very clear. If the charges and the fees, there's going to go into a tax assessment, and Rachel is going to bill them or take it out put it into their property tax. We did bump the unit fee, or we wanted to bump the unit fee from $10 to $15. This is something just because the multi-unit complexes take so much more time than going into a single family, and it takes them, half an hour, 45 minutes, or you go into a unit in a multi-family, it can take you half an hour per unit. And then you've got how many, you got one that's coming online here another year, so it's got 99 in it, or 93 in it. So that's a lot, it's gonna take us a long time. We are clarifying, the non-payment, non-compliance issue with a municipal infraction. We're doing that in the table of fees as well. We have added a rescheduling fee of $25. That's really an administration fee, because when somebody calls in, then our housing admin has to find some place to put them to do that inspection. And sometimes she's on the phone with them for 10 minutes. Sometimes she's on the phone for them with 20 or 25, sometimes a half an hour, to try and schedule them, find a place that we can put them in, because it seems like every time we tell them, well, we got a slot here, well, we can't make that work. So we have another slot here, but we can't make that work. So sometimes it takes a while. And we can waive that fee. We have talked about it in our office, and we're working on a policy of what we will waive the fees for. So if somebody is a sickness, we had a lot of COVID cases coming, and obviously we don't want our inspector in there when they have COVID. If somebody is sick, illness, maybe they're in the hospital, who knows? If they have a death in the family, or if there's something like that, something similar, we want to be able to waive that fee. We don't want it to be set in stone that we have to collect. I mean, we have a little bit of compassion. Terrell, can I get the next slide? So we have the list of comparable cities that everybody has seen, I think. So I reached out to the jurisdictions. Just start with Ankeny. They started a new process in 2018. They have a 3-year cycle. They have one inspector, and then all their building inspectors that are in their department will help if they need it. They get $50 in inspection and $50 for registration, and $25 for every additional unit. So where we're asking for 15, they actually get 25. Other than that, the fees are pretty similar. They do not charge a landlord license, which we do charge an annual landlord license. Bettendorf is reworking their fees right now. They're reviewing it. The guy I talked to gave me their fees right now, and they are lower than what we are, but they are reviewing, so they don't know exactly where they're gonna land. Cedar Falls does charge for a license. They do inspections every 5 years. Their fees are real similar to what ours are. Dubuque's also does a license. Their fees are lower, quite a bit lower actually, but they do inspections every year. They don't do them every 2. They also, if they have problems with, if they have, that the person doesn't comply the first time, then they come back and they inspect you every 3 months until you comply. So they actually, and they charge a fee every time they come and do that every three months. Johnston is reviewing their policy right now. All their building inspectors are doing housing inspections too. Lynn County is developing a program. They have one inspector currently, they just hired somebody. And they're actually doing inspections for all the, I won't say all, but a lot of the small communities in Lynn County. So Central City and Springville and all those, they're doing the inspections. So they're actually going to do housing inspections for them. They'll do code enforcement for them. North Liberty, they have a license. Their fees are a little bit lower. I haven't figured this one out yet. They do inspections every 3 years. They have 1 admin and 2 inspectors. In Urbandale, they charge a license. Their fees are real similar. They have a 2-year inspection rotation, and they have 5 inspectors that do everything, again, building and housing. Cedar Rapids, we kind of compared our stuff to them in 2019. They do charge a license. Their fees are similar since we kind of went off of them. I think we might be a little higher on a few spots. They do 5 years, but as I was talking to their head guy for the housing, he's like, they're changing that. It's gonna change because their council was telling them that there's too many complaints. They need to step it up a little bit. They have 7 inspectors, 7 housing inspectors. They have 22,000 roughly housing units. So if you think about that, that's about 1,570 per inspector. And right now, we're doing 4,500 with 1 inspector every 2 years. So you're what, 2,250 roughly. So our guy is keeping up. Hiawatha has similar fees. They also charge a license, and they have 3 inspectors that do everything. So that's kind of it. I'm open to questions if you have some.
Sure. So I have a couple questions and a couple observations.
Yeah, sure.
Now as a tenant myself, I have an appreciation for good landlords. It's been a while since I've had to have a landlord, so I do have a new appreciation for that.
Sure.
On to my question. So I've fielded phone calls from residents in my ward about concerns. And one of the things that I think I really appreciated you saying is, right, making sure that we're following up on those complaints and helping our landlords become compliant, because it affects the quality of life of our residents.
Right.
So, I'm of the mindset that, if the landlord is doing good work, right, a $25 or $30 fee, it's not really a big deal. But we want to really make sure those landlords that aren't providing good quality of life,
Right.
that those fees are steep for them to become compliant.
Yeah,
And
it really
so-
is.
So I just think that's really important. We continue to look at it from that lens, the folks that are doing the work the way they're supposed to be and managing their units the way they should be. It's not a big deal, right? But it's a big deal for those 25% of our residents that are struggling with having homes that for quality of life. So I'm in support of whatever we can do to get those folks to become compliant.
Sure.
I guess an observation that you were hitting on was the fact that we have 2 inspectors, and we're going to continue to.
Well, we have an admin and 1 inspector.
1 inspector,
Yeah.
and we're going to continue to grow the number of units that we have here. So that, I think that directly sort of impacts this idea of making sure folks are compliant.
Yeah.
So I guess those are my observations. My question would be, based on these changes that you're suggesting, Are there other things that we should be considering to make sure that our landlords keep their properties in compliance for our residents?
Well, I think you have to look at the other end of the spectrum, because I had a gal call me today and they only have 2 properties in Marion, so it's easy for them to keep them up. But she was insistent that we should be doing something for the good landlords, the ones that actually keep up their properties. And I know at one time we did, we did it every 3 years, and if they complied twice in that 3-year period, or in the 6-year period, then you could go to 5 years. I have had jurisdictions that tell me they do that. Right now, our software that we have does not allow us to change our amount of days. So if I either have to do 2 years for everybody, 3 years for everybody, 5 years for everybody. To try and alter that, it would be a nightmare. But I do think that if we got a software that would work for this and we could change the date, I do think that is a possibility, that if you're a good landlord and you pass your inspection every time, we don't have to come back. I think that's a good possibility that we could possibly, encourage people, as this gal told me, dangle the carrot and see if somebody nibbles on it, and the way we've been doing it, we've been doing the opposite. We've been saying, well, if you don't comply, we're going to charge you and you're going to, pay for the fee. And I still believe that is, money talks. And I think that if you're talking about trying to get into somebody's pocketbook, I think that, will help. But I also think we should be looking at the other end of the spectrum. So at this point in time, we can't, but as far as other things, I don't know that there's a whole lot else we can do. We actually lowered a couple of our fees on our re-inspections and our no-shows because it didn't make a lot of sense. We were going off a certain percentage, and so we just dropped it to an even dollar. But yeah, I don't know that there's a whole lot more that we can do at this point anyway.
Seems like software might be something we should be
Could be, yeah.
considering. Yeah.
You'll be hearing from us on that later.
Good, very good. Well, thank you for your work on this, Gary.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Steve and then Grant.
Yeah, 2 comments. That was one of my comments, is about the software. Again, I believe in investing in software if it's going to make you more efficient.
Right.
And the other aspect you talked about, it's kind of surprising, the range of inspection frequencies for all the cities you talked about go all the way from 1 to 5.
Right.
So I can certainly see the aspect. If you got better software, then you can accommodate the flexibility that not everybody needs to be inspected every 2 years.
Right.
Maybe some are every year, some are every 4 to 5 years.
Yeah.
So to me, that makes a lot of sense as well. But how did we land on 2 years as a city when you've got evidently a range of number of years that the city can select?
We were at 3 previously, before 2019 when we
Yeah.
changed. And 3 just seemed to be too many. I mean, it was just one of those things that we just kept having so much, people, so many complaints. Our complaints were up 57% at that time. And we just had so many complaints. We thought, well, let's try something. So let's try and cut it back to 2. So we went to 2.
Yeah.
And at that time, Cedar Rapids was still at 5. And I know that after that, they were starting to get a little, council was getting after them a little bit about the amount of time, because they have so many complaints as well. So we just landed on 2, and we thought that was, reasonable. We thought we could make it work. And I still think we can. I still think our inspector, if he's efficient, can get out there and get them done. We still help him when we get to these units that have 30 or 40 or 90 or whatever. He still gets help from the building department. So it's not truly that he's our only inspector. He is, but the building department inspectors will kick in and help him on those big units, because he would be on a 93 unit complex. He would have to be, he'd be there for 4 days. He'd be doing a floor a day, and that doesn't make a lot of sense. So yeah, I think to answer your question, I think the 2 years is still okay. I think it'll work.
Well, I do believe the software would accommodate the flexibility of good landlords don't need to be inspected every 2 years. Some need to be inspected every year. And I think the software, hopefully, if you are getting the right software, would accommodate you to being able to rate the landlords accordingly
Right.
and then inspect them accordingly.
Yeah.
All right, thanks. Go ahead.
Yeah. Gary, I guess all I really wanted to do is echo the comments that Colette and Steve just made. I'm all for accelerating the inspection and enforcement for poor performers. And for good performers, I think a reduced inspection cycle of activity is appropriate for all the reasons that you just heard, even from the one
Right.
landlord. And I think that I'm really anxious for you to present to us some information about software, because I think that's going to have a pretty good return on investment. It's going to make this whole program run much more efficiently, and it's going to give you the flexibility in order to, I guess, reward the good performers. So I'm anxious to see that at your earliest convenience.
Yeah, well, we are too. And our admin person is adamant about we need to get it changed, and she's been pushing me for a while, and I've been pushing Tom a little bit, and we're finally getting somewhere, I think. But you're right, we're making a list of things that need to change on our software. So when we put out an RFP for what we want, we're gonna have a list of things that it has to meet. So we're trying to be proactive there.
Just a postscript to that, if there's any package that allows for online schedule management, where the landlord goes in and sees available dates, so that becomes less of a manual transaction, that would be
Yeah.
great too.
Good idea.
Our current software is actually allowing us, I don't know, Rachel, you can maybe answer that. Did they get the licensing payment online scheduled? Get that fit working?
Yes, we just did it with business license.
Yeah.
And cigarette license renewals, and we had a payment today, so it's working.
We are working with our current software. At least we can try and do that they make a payment for their business license online. That'll help. I mean, it should make it easier for the landlords to make that payment once a year. So
I think the scheduling thing would be a big help. Will, go ahead.
I had a landlord reach out to me before I had a chance to review this fee schedule, and their comment or question, which now I think is more of a comment because I think they were saying that in Cedar Rapids, if you had your first inspection, and they said the first inspection was at no cost, unless they had to come back, then there was a fee if you didn't pass. But ours, I see, is $75 unless there's no infractions, and it's no cost.
right.
They thought that it was changing to that. It was going to be 75 no matter what.
No,
So
it's still not. We're not giving them we're giving them the if they pass the first time, we waive that fee. They still have to pay a registration fee, but they don't have to pay the inspection fee.
and their comment, I guess, on it was, well, what if, say, code change, and now you come and inspect, and it's been a code change for a year, they didn't know about it. You come in and then you ding them because the code changed and they didn't know, so now they have to come back for re-inspect. So now they're gonna have to pay the fee. So that was more their comment. was
Yeah,
that.
and I get that. There's a couple things there. First of all, we have a document online that they can look at as things that are frequent code issues,
Mhm.
and we update that. So if we update our code, we update that document as well. The other thing is that depending on what it is, and I was talking to a landlord today about that, and he goes, well, when things change, he says, how do I know that? And I go, well, depending on what it is, a lot of times if it's something that is life safety, well, there's no giving on that. Life safety is life safety. But if it's something that has changed, a lot of times the housing inspector will go in there and he'll say, you know what? He said, the code changed. He'll say, get it fixed by the next time you have an inspection. So he'll give them actually 2 years to fix some of that stuff. Now, again, if it's a life safety thing, he's not, but usually life safety things do not change that much. So I can't imagine that would happen, but, and also, he has a few times, if it's a good landlord that maybe had everything corrected and then something changed, and they say, well, I'll go ahead and fix it, but I don't want to pay that extra fee. Well, he'll say, well, take a picture of it or take a video of it and show it to me, send it to me via email. And he says, I'll charge you for the regular inspection, but I won't charge you for the re-inspection. So, we're trying to work with them.
Sure.
Our housing inspector that way is very good about that. He's really willing to try and help the landlords. And I've had a lot of good comments from our landlords about him. So.
Good. Great. And I would also comment about the whole new software that being in the line of business that I'm in, I go into a lot of houses that were rentals or are rentals that are for sale. And sometimes you walk in and go, this is a rental? How can they get away with doing what they're doing inside this house?
Yeah.
So the bad ones, it would be great to be able to have more frequent inspections.
Yeah.
Because there are some bad ones out there.
There are, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I was going to tell you that I think you'll probably have a couple people come Thursday night and talk. I know the gal that I talked to today about the wanting to dangle the carrot. I'm pretty sure she'll be here. There could be some others that have questions about it, and hopefully we'll do our public hearing. We'll answer those questions for them. So.
Thank you. I think this is very timely that we're doing this. I mean, considering we kind of have an explosion in multifamily projects coming online here. I think I shared a number at the State of the City was, I think, 751 units in the works.
Yeah, there's a lot.
So, yeah, good job. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
All right, next item, F4.
So this is a four-door review property located at 1367th Avenue. This is the Sweet Cheesecake project. It was the old auto rebuilding shop on the north side of 7th Avenue, just east of Pizza Hut. If you recall, the back side of the property was damaged by derecho and it caved in. And so the new owners are proposing to put in the Sweet Cheesecake building, and they've proposed a revamp of it. You can see they've painted it and they've got some wood exterior finishes to it, and it's been received very well internally. I just point out that a part of their site plan, they are going requesting an 8-foot fence on the back side of the property. So they've requested a variance for that. It's going to the zoning board tonight. And then there's 2 parking stalls that are located on the west side of the drive entrance. They've asked for an exception on. This has been through several committees, including Uptown. They brought it through the HPC, or Historic Preservation Commission meeting, just for informational. Planning Commission reviewed it at the last meeting. There was recommending approval and also supported the exception for the parking. It creates some difficulties as you enter and exit the area. They've also done some work they have conversations with Pizza Hut, and they got across, I think they have access. If you go through the backside of Pizza Hut, you can kind of go into their property. And then they've also worked with them on some parking conversations. So while they are actually asking for an exception to some of the parking, they've got some agreements in place. And also I point out that as with the request for 2 going away, when 7th Avenue gets redone in this area, there'll be 2 spaces right outside their front door. So we're not too concerned about the parking situation, and so the zoning board will have that decision performed tonight. And so on Thursday, our planning commission is recommending approval, and then we can provide a report out of what happens tonight at the zoning board of adjustment meeting.
Okay, well, this is a great improvement to the curb appeal of that site. Any questions? Yeah, I don't know that I would be concerned too much about parking, because the type of businesses you're gonna have people, in and out of there. It's not really a place that people are gonna go linger for too long. So great little business that's outgrown their basement. All right, next item.
The next item I just wanted to bring up, because there's been a lot of conversations about the outdoor cafes. Hipster is requested oh, I'm sorry, did I skip ahead? I did. Sorry. So we'll start with this one. This item is the West End Central Corridor Review. So West End is proposing to put up a pavilion on their site. You can see they've upgraded their visuals as it relates to the original information in the packet, and they've provided an additional illustration. So the big question, and I think the count has been on the minds of council, and I think we've had calls from the public as well. There are some posts that have been in place on the pad for a period of time. They did get the appropriate approvals to put the posts in, indicating that if in fact this was not approved, that they would just use it for festoon lighting as they've done elsewhere on the site. But they did go back, provided the illustrations, and went to the Planning and Zoning Commission last week. They did recommend approval of moving forward. Their condition was to include wrapping of the poles with a consistent material and color of the other units. And so this illustration does not show that. That would be Planning Commission's recommendation moving it forward.
Okay, questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Tom, do you know, is the roof of the pavilion going to be, if you look at the ceiling, will there be a ceiling or will it just be open truss construction?
That I do
Well,
not know.
Here, why I was going down that line of thought was, and maybe Gary knows more about this than I do, but if that were an open truss construction, under certain wind conditions, that effectively becomes a wing. And I was then beginning to wonder, is it necessary to include venting at the top in order to reduce any kind of natural lift that would be caused under certain wind conditions? Anyway, sorry, something I thought about.
Yeah, of course. I thought about that too.
Anyone else?
Gary and I can have a conversation about that. I'm sure he will enlighten me as well.
I'm actually looking at the plans
Oh.
I don't.
Gary, would you mind using the microphone? Thanks.
I actually pulled the plans up on my computer. So they are not showing any venting in there. And they're not showing any anything on the bottom. So it sounds to me like it's going to be open construction. Look kind of what it looks like.
It says on here, the interior ceiling will be unfinished to accommodate festoon lighting and other decorative effects. So that appears to be that it's not going to be finished, right?
That is correct.
Look at that. I read the packet.
So
Go ahead.
yeah, Your Honor, maybe this isn't a design concern. It just struck me in terms of just other structures I've seen where they provided for that kind of venting, that's all. So if it's not a design requirement, certainly then my inquiry is moot. I was just raising the question of, looks kind of strange given the size of the structure.
The plans have been engineered. So there are design plans and they have met the 115-mile-an-hour wind. So I don't see it as being a problem, but I understand what you're saying. It's gonna be like a parachute if the wind gets underneath that.
So the recommendation is to approve with that condition that the posts are wrapped.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, is that clear for everybody? Any other questions?
No,
Go ahead.
and I'm going to ask this question and I should know the answer, but I believe one of the amendments we made to the building code was upping the wind speed, the wind speed that a building needs to be designed to as a part of our building code, which has been great. I mean, I think that's a good response to what we've been through. And so that's something that a positive action that I think we took after derecho. So.
Okay. All right, moving on to F6, hipster.
So as indicated a second ago under the wrong item, Hipster is requested to move forward with the encroachment agreement to proceed with their outdoor cafe, both in the front of the building along 7th Avenue and then also in the back in the alleyway, similar to what they did last year. So we've been working with them. We're a little out ahead of the actual document that we're going to be using, but we've just kind of mimicked what will be approved in their request. They've got diagrams to put tables and chairs out exactly where we envisioned them as a part of the front of the building, and in the rear. Last year they had them kind of spread out a little bit, and there wasn't really a defined access point through the alleyway. We have indicated they're going to need to maintain a 48-inch or 4-foot section on that north side of the alleyway. That'll have to have a barrier up so that people walking the alley can get through in that vicinity. So it's going to be designed a little bit different. They'll have a 6-foot area where they can have their tables and chairs on the rear, but they'll have to have that defined access area. So, and this on Thursday would be providing all the approvals to make that happen.
Okay, questions? All right, no questions. Then we'll move on with F7.
So F7 is, as many of you are aware, Brick Alley Bar, which is located at 1038 and 48 7th Avenue. On their backside, they had a patio on the back area that's open air, fencing around it. It did not have access to the alley. They had some structural damage to that area, and they're looking at redoing the entire patio and providing some access down to the alley. What they've requested is a 22-inch by 36-inch encroachment into the alleyway to put stairs up into the onto that terrace area. One of the reasons they're asking for it is they got some windows and doors at the top that they just can't push those steps all the way in on their property. We did do a review of this internally, and I think even in the packet, and we could probably put this up on Thursday if there's a desire for it. Much of the street furniture that's in and around and along the sides of the alleyway that remain there throughout the year are in a similar area. This does not extend past what the street furniture would extend. And so there is support for providing that access and making that patio a little more engaging to the alleyway. So. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm in support of them having access to the alleyway. I think that is good for that entire area. But one question I had when I was looking at that is they're putting this, they want this sidewalk or steps to go on the northwest corner. But if you look at that on the northeast corner, the patio is already at a 45-degree angle. And it seems like that if they put the stairs there, it might be less obtrusive into the alleyway. So are they going to keep that at a 45 or square that off when they rebuild that? So the 45-degree angle seems to be a little more natural and maybe less in the alley. So I don't know how they're going to reconstruct that whole thing. I know it needs a lot of work.
If I'm reading their illustration correctly, and this would be a good question for the applicant.
Yeah.
They are showing it's squared off, so they may.
Well, they're showing it in that northwest, very northwest corner where their wall comes out. And I know there's a big planter there right now, and that may kind of shield people from walking into the steps from the west side. But then I looked at it and I go, you got that 45-degree angle already there, kind of a little setback. Yeah. Would that mean, if they did it there, would that mean less of the steps would be out into the alley than the other location?
Run them kind of
east-west
instead of north-south.
Right. Well, it'd be at an angle, yeah. So
I'll verify, but from their drawing, it's illustrating that they're gonna square that off under their revised plans, but I can find out on that.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Okay, other questions? I know it seems minor, but I'm not sure that I would make that a permanent easement. I would make it a temporary easement for as long as that terrace exists. The terrace doesn't exist at some point. I mean, maybe it will always be there, but you can't assume that. And if it doesn't exist at some point, or if it's, something else, then they don't need the easement. disappear. So, I mean, it would, for all practical purposes, it would be permanent as long as that terrace is there. But I would make it temporary as long as the terrace is there. In its current shape and location. I mean, it may be different at some point.
I can speak on that. We typically, even when we do a permanent easement, we do a sundown clause in it, and I can verify that we put one in this one. And that would mean that if they're not using it for those stairs, the easement terminates, even if it's permanent.
Okay, well, then I mean, the resolution, I would hate to have somebody come back and challenge us at some point. If the resolution that's approved says permanent easement, somebody could say this is forever and ever, no matter what. So I mean, I would either change the resolution somehow to just make it clear. Or if that's the consensus about the I mean, does anybody disagree about what I said about making it disappear when? Okay.
However we do it.
So I would just kind of clarify the resolution so it's clear in that. Okay. Will, go ahead.
I guess my concern with this though is I know it says in the report that the bench and the was it a trash can or planter sitting there are gonna stay there. But if those ever go, then we've got a stairs sticking out into the alley, right in the walkway.
Trip hazard?
It's exactly what I'm thinking. It's trip hazard. I mean, you could paint them or whatever, like, but it's still a trip hazard. It's still going to be there in the way. So that's my, yeah. I mean, I would like to see them have steps down, but that's just.
Yeah, it's just, that's the concern about the permanency of it is that, you know, conditions might change. You might not have the furniture there at some point, or who knows?
Yeah, that's my, part of my comment or about coming out at that 45-degree angle. Would it be less of a trip hazard because there would be less of it in the alley itself? Because you're already using up some of that 45-degree angle that is now just empty space. So something to look at.
So if I may interject,
Go ahead.
that step will be required to have a handrail on it.
Mhm.
So that handrail will come out to the end of the steps, and actually by code should probably come out a little further than the bottom of the step. So
I think we'll, thank you for that. I think Will's concern is that people walking in the alley, you know, it's just, it's protruding out, and that may be the trip hazard, not the rail. That's Will's, is that right, Will?
Yeah, I mean, I understand there's gonna be a rail on it, which would help you to see it, but if we're walking side by side and I'm looking at you talking and I'm walking down the alley, there shouldn't be anything in my way but anyway.
Go ahead.
Because that is kind of the central gathering. I mean, it's not like we're on the off side of it on a separate area. I mean, this is like the gathering space technically. Oh, things get a little crowded in the alley. There's a great band on the steps. Next thing you know, people are they're gonna stand on it. It's become like I'm gonna sit down here instead of the bench is full, and you start using it for the other pieces of it. I'm with them. I understand it. I don't like it. Because of, that's the space, and I just can't believe that that's the best option. But
So I think this is all good conversation, and that's why we come to the council for these types of situations. So we'll reach out to Les and let him know there's some concerns and make sure that he's here, and maybe between now and Thursday, he can take some of the comments that I'm hearing, and I'll relay them to him and see if there's a different option.
Because
we did ask very specific questions about why can't you push it back in, and that way it's just clear. And his concern was what I'd mentioned, but there's certainly other options. So
because this is purely a convenience business. It's not because it's a fire, you need an exit. It isn't because it's nothing like that. I mean, it's purely convenience of being able to go off there and into the alley off of that space.
correct.
Okay, well, yeah, and you know, I don't think it's there's a desire to be unaccommodating to the business owner. I mean, I think we try to be as accommodating as possible. I think, you know, there's just some concerns that maybe we can try to find a solution. Yes, Grant, go ahead.
Yeah, Tom, in the packet, there's a pencil drawing that shows the alignment of the steps. And there is a door on the adjacent port or wall of the building. If you go through that exterior door, does that then ultimately lead to the door that enters in onto the alleyway? What I'm trying to understand is there internal to the building a passageway that still allows patrons to get down onto the alley?
If I recall correctly, you go in and then I don't believe that goes straight down because there's quite a bit of elevation. And if you come in the back door, it's like it's a ramp.
Yeah, it's a ramp.
Yeah. So I think normally you would go directly through the double doors that you can see in the packet. And then you walk through another room and then you get to the bar area and you got to take a right and then back down. And it's a long ramp that goes in there. So I don't believe that that's a direct access point.
Oh, that one, the one in the alley.
I think that's part of the conversation that I've had with Les is that you have to go in and almost all the way through half the building to get to the patio.
Yeah.
That's been his concern. So it's not utilized as much as if he had direct access.
I agree.
Okay. Sounds like I need to make a field trip.
I'll go with you.
I'll get a note.
I mean, I was going off recollection. That's all I'm gonna say.
Okay, anything else on that item? Okay, so this item will be on the agenda for Thursday? Or do we need more time to figure out a more workable solution, or is there's no other workable solution?
Well, I can reach out to him, and if he's available and there's questions, I'm sure, you know, before you see something, it could be tabled or.
Well, I think there's a desire to accommodate, but I'm sure there's just some concerns.
I don't believe, and maybe Gary can correct me, I don't believe that he has full building and construction plans and is ready to pull the trigger.
That's okay. All right.
Yeah.
So there's time.
Yeah.
Okay, next item.
And so the next item is F8, and just briefly, the city did go through a process and solicit proposals for a housing needs assessment. We received 2 proposals. One was from Maxfield Research and Consulting. Another proposal was from a company out of Philadelphia. There was a pretty substantial pricing difference, but we did have it internally reviewed. And the overwhelmingly support was for Maxfield Research Consulting LLC. And so we'd like to work through the contract to approve moving forward with them as soon as possible. As you know, the housing needs assessment is what we go through to understand the housing market in the community, especially now. It's very important for us. Our last one is 6 years old. We're going to have workforce housing tax credit applications coming in and LIHTC project applications coming in with all the dollars that are being dedicated to Lynn County through the Disaster Recovery Fund, the CDBG dollars. This will help guide us and provide information to provide incentives, programs, policies on how to address housing and housing needs in the community moving forward.
Okay, questions? Look at that, exactly on time, Rachel. Go ahead.
Not anymore.
Colette's got a question.
The answer is yes, Colette. It's yes.
Well,
We're
this is
still at 5:35, so
okay.
you can.
I suspect this is in the packet. I was trying to look at it quick, just a couple of quick questions. How long will it take them to complete this analysis? And then how long are these usually good for? You said the last one was 6 years ago. So once we have this done, like at what point does it sort of expire?
So it's going to take between 3 and 5 months.
Okay.
And I say that because we're going to ask them to put together some base data rather quickly so we can be able to respond to some of these workforce housing tax credit applications that are going to go to the state. The state requires that we have an updated needs assessment every 5 years. So and I've contacted the state. They know we're in process and we're working through that with them. In a fast growing market though, this is something we should probably have updated a little more often. The city of Cedar Rapids actually uses this same firm. They go through a process. They have I know that they go through and ask this company to come in, provide they do a mini research, come back and provide updated numbers every year, which do we need that? We'll find out. But I think that service would be of value to us as a community, especially as many multifamily housing projects and LMI projects and workforce housing projects that we're seeing, and the availability of funding for those is outlandishly important to those projects and getting those types of units in the community. So,
Thank you.
Anything else? Yeah, go ahead.
How much was budgeted for this? So how is it close to what was budgeted?
Oh, significantly under. We were expecting over 30,000.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Anyone else? Okay, one of the benefits of having your Easter on a different calendar is you get to buy Easter candy for 75% off. But
I'll sell you my candy for 90%.
the unfortunate thing is I have to leave to go to a church service. So thank you. Will, it's all yours.
Oh, boy. Thanks. You're leaving the treats though, right?
I'm leaving the treats, but I'm going to pass
Yes.
them down here.
Oh, what? Whoa, whoa, whoa. All right. Seth, I think you're up, huh?
All right. So I wanted to come before council and talk about the Outdoor Aquatic Center plan. So this is a plan just to bring everyone back. Back in 2017, as part of the Imagine Access, was one of the future 4 items that was brought forward. And so with that, and then also knowing the end of life of the future or the end of life of Willowwood, we did an aquatics feasibility study to take a look at what the aquatic needs for the community. We did that within just under 2 years. COVID and derecho played an effect into that. And then we presented council on August 17th with the final report. I think everyone recalls that meeting. Moving on to the next slide. So following up from that final report, there was direction from council from the final concept that was presented to have some corrections within there. And so we're seeking for direction from council, and we've brought forward 3 options, which are variations from that final conceptual plan, in which we can, once we have a final or direction from council from a final concept, we can look and do further research on answering some of these questions as far as looking at a site plan, land acquisition, funding plan, project schedule, and then end of life for the Willowwood pool. Again, this is not a final decision by council. We're gonna look and bring more metrics to council so that they have all the information to be able to proceed with an aquatic center. Next slide. So we have 3 conceptuals here. We did present this to Park Board, and Park Board had a preference on concept A. A big reason for that is one, it's the full build according to the study, and their mindset is as we start going down this road and making decision points, it's going to be easier to be able to pull back than it is to add on, which is going to be something as we move forward. We do have another conceptual, which is going to be an option for growth. And then we want to provide an option that was the least expensive for council so they can see what that plan does look like. So moving on to looking at the concepts, just a real brief overview of these conceptuals. From the final concept, this is going to be more or less looking like from the final study. We did remove the splash pad component and actually added in with the leisure pool that's located right in the center there. That's going to be a 0 entry to 3.5 foot of water. Going to be one of the most busiest bodies of water. We do have a lap pool with the fun ninja course located on the right side of the screen. Above that is going to be a diving well with platforms and a diving board. In the middle there, the top center, where we have a wave pool that will be 0 entry to 5 to 6 feet of water. That is going to have wave caissons present there. And then we have 3 slides, which one being a marquee slide, meaning it's a slide that we won't see anywhere else within the area, which is the Boomerango, and then a lazy river, which will be one of the more popular bodies of water. Going to the next slide. This is going to be a $26 million plan, and we've based this on 2026 dollars, looking at inflation. So this is a plan, direct reflection from the feasibility study. The operational cost for this facility, we're projecting to be 70 to 100% plus for operational cost recovery. This does require 26 lifeguards to staff. And then what's this sitting on is about 4.4 acres of property, and that's without the parking lot. So if we were to include the parking lot, you need 10 to 11 acres for that. So for concept B, this is with an option to phase in the wave pool. So taking one of the components that was kind of questionable during the process and having an option to phase in. The reason for phasing in is to be able to, once we get to a certain point where retention is suffering, to be able to include that to help that along. So moving on to the next slide, we'll see that this is about a $23 million option for 2026. The operating cost is down about 80,000. The big part of that is staffing, which is why we presented how many lifeguards it takes for the other concept. But we think the revenue would be very similar to concept A, because it still has a lot of those high-end amenities and things that were asked for during the study. This is a larger acreage, and the reason why it's larger than the other ones is because when we take out that wave pool, we're also removing a lot of deck space. And so we asked within this concept to add more deck space, to add more space in between pools and bodies of water, so we can accommodate those people that don't just want to swim, but want to just enjoy the outside and enjoy the atmosphere. And moving on to concept C. So this is the least expensive option. Wanted to provide those because that's always a question, is what is the cheaper option that we can afford or can look at doing. So this has pretty much all of the components, but when I say it doesn't meet the community or meet the needs of the study, is it doesn't match the metrics that we gathered from the study when we looked at surface water per capita, and then doing all their surveys and gathering all their information from the public as far as what they wanted to see in these amenities and what they wanted to see within their aquatic center. Going to the next slide. So this is a $18 million plan, bare bones. Doesn't have the enhanced features, so it doesn't have the enhanced landscaping, the rock, no ninja course, no marquee slide. The lazy river is about half the size. For those that went on to the aquatic tours, when we toured different aquatic centers throughout the state of Iowa, this is going to be most similar to the second location where it had the smaller lazy river. And then the concept A would be, and B would be closer to that Ankeny Aquatic Center that we went and visited. And this is about 3.48 acres, not including, so you're looking at your 7 to 8 acres of property, including parking. So with council direction, we're looking to move forward with one of these designs. This is not a final decision by any points. We want to be able to gain more metrics and more information to bring forward to council so they have more information to make more informed decisions. So some of the next steps we will be doing, and these are steps crucial for the next couple of years, is to develop a funding plan so we know, what can we afford, when can we afford it, and then where do those buckets of money come from. A site acquisition, looking at site planning so we can actually pose this site or put this concept onto a plan and start looking at those. We did put in dollar amounts for parking and for utilities. But depending on site, those will change. Then we also have the potential project timeline, and then also an end of life for the current pool. So as we move forward, we'll want to continue to bring council and the community in with this process, so that this is a project for the whole city. So, any questions?
Grant?
Seth, one of the things that struck me between A, B, and C is that the filter house kind of moves around.
So,
And yeah, let me just comment what my question or my thought was on this. If the location of the filter house was stabilized, and then we treat each one of the components of the aquatic center, the wave pool, the ninja and the lap pool, et cetera, that wouldn't that give us greater flexibility of a plan to pick, this, and this without altering the entire plumbing structure of what I'm trying to do is give us as much flexibility in terms of the option. And then let's say it is B, and then we want to build it out at a future date, that we're minimizing the disruption to the total system. Did that make sense?
it does, and I would say, so these variations of plans are going to change as we move forward, because what's going to happen is when we look at different sites, they have different layouts. And so depending on where the site is and where the traffic flow and everything else, that's going to change that location. But we kind of try to piecemeal it together. If you looked in the memo, I provided these concepts and then kind of the price points. The plumbing is going to be right now is just kind of a placeholder with the idea sum. And so that's going to fluctuate, not as much as what like each of these components would be, if that makes sense.
Okay. One other question. The full build out you said had a staffing requirement of how many lifeguards?
According to the study we did, that was 26, and that's more for zone, and they were very conservative when they did those. And so when we say 26 lifeguards, this doesn't mean like 26 are on deck. It means that's 26 lifeguards on staff. So we're going to have, about 19 on the deck, and then we're going to have those that rotate in.
So between A and C, is there a substantial staffing difference?
Yeah, there's going to be substantial operation cost, but what you're sacrificing too is the potential cost recovery. Your retention is going to be lower because you're not going to have that regional attraction. You still have a lot of components that would be attractive, but your retention is going to be lower. It's going to be more similar to what Cedar Rapids has for aquatic centers. And in a growing city, we're not reaching, it's always going to feel packed when there's going to be fewer people there. If that makes sense.
Well, I received a vote of confidence when this first came up from some neighbors who have younger families. And they said that they, load up the van and they drive up to Cedar Falls or wherever.
Yes.
And Waterloo. And so they're really eager for something like this much closer. So with that kind of input coming from young families, I this seems to be a must-do project. It's just how we put it together.
Yeah.
Anyway.
We're gonna go Sarah and then Steve.
Thank you for your work on this, and I appreciate you giving us the spatials on what these different like lazy rivers and whatever, But again, one of the things we learned, because it was eye-opening that day that we went and looked at all of these. And I want to reiterate that it was eye-opening. And my kids are past the time where they're going to use it, like we saw the families. But there were the other components to it. When you just look at it, you think, oh, lazy river, isn't that cute? That's kind of fun. But when you hear the information that all three or both of them, and then Ankeny really reiterated it, that it isn't just the lazy river, that they have walking groups that use the lazy river for water walking, which working for an organization that has pools and understanding the demand for water in this community and people who want the ability to water walk and everything, you know, that one was too small. And when I think about, it's not just for the little kids, but how we can do that. So I agree with you, again, we have to figure out how to do it to reach higher, because I think we've put it out with the community, the excitement for this type of a project. And I don't want to underwhelm people by something that a few years from now is already too small. And I think we saw that at one of the examples that we visited, that it was used for some people with little kids, but once they got to a certain age, it just wasn't there. And I thought that would be a huge disappointment if we start to see that, which it was so exciting. And I'm not jumping off any big rocks that we saw them doing at those different pieces. But seeing that, I'm thinking, I can see where these kids are having a great time with this. I mean, it didn't have to be a fancy diving board. It was jumping off a big platform that looked cool. And I think there's some real fun that we could have. So you're going to ask us to pick one, so you know?
I would like to have a final, I guess, direction as far as from these conceptuals, what council's comfortable with us moving forward as far as in seeking some of those other decision points or steps. There's going to be times, once we have those decision points, we'll be coming back to council for, I wouldn't say a final decision, but decision to move forward. There's many steps in this process till we actually get to either bonding, bidding, and construction.
And can you refresh my memory? When we did, there was some voting online. Did that have these three on it, or was that something else that we had like on a Facebook?
When we voted online, we provided a survey out to the community, which we had like 1,300 respond for that. Then we also provided a website, which was kind of like a social media platform where they could provide comments. Conceptual A is pretty much what came from that study. And so the reason why I'm coming back forward with 3 plans is when we provided that conceptual, that was like within the same week we went on those tours, and it was eye-opening seeing, okay, well, maybe we don't need that splash pad component off on its own. And so there was changes in there. And so we just thought it would be a good decision. Hey, let's just bring some options to council. So because we also get questions to them, hey, what's the reason why we put the cheaper option on there was to show, okay, well, what is like the bare bones option? So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so I was with Sarah on that tour, and it was a day well spent looking at all the different water aquatics facilities over in the Des Moines area. As I compare A, B, and C, C would not excite me at all. I don't think it's going to excite the community. There's not enough stuff in there. The 3 things that kept coming to the top when you visited every place is the lazy river. The biggest, the baddest one is the best. Okay, that came out very clear. You need lots of chairs and you need lots of shade. Okay, so from that standpoint, I look at B and C. So they both have, I think, a similar size lazy river.
B and A, or A and B.
Oh, excuse me, A and B, I'm sorry, A and B. So A and B, you need I think you need a large lazy river. That was very clear. That's the most popular area. Like Sarah said, it's multi-uses for it as well. I look at B. B to me has everything in it that different family members, different ages of people can use. So to me, there's something there for everybody. And if I compare A and B, the major difference is the wave pool. And one of the sites had that. I looked at it and it was popular. But if I'm saying, that's another $3 million, you're already talking a pretty large sum. I would favor B over A. And also from the standpoint that you still have it designed for future flexibility, where you can add a wave pool in the future, or by the time this gets designed or in the future, there may be something else more popular than a wave pool. So I think it gives the city something to add in the future, which would add more excitement in the future, even after, if this is built and is approved, you can add a feature in the future. So from my standpoint, I like B better than A and B both better than C.
Mhm.
So.
Just happy. I will ditto or echo what Steve said. Nice work. And I'm with B. I think it gives us an opportunity to expand if we decide. What I was chuckling about is that $18 million is bare bones, right? Wow.
Yeah.
It goes to show that this is a big project. So I would recommend, my recommendation is B.
One other thing to comment on, you did not include in your presentation, you talked about the number of acres for the water aquatics park itself. I think in one of your presentations months ago, you talked about what is the need for the entire area, because you're talking about, didn't you talk about the desire for about 10 or 11 acres?
Yeah.
For the entire area?
Yep.
So is that
Yeah, that
amount of land part of this plan, or just what you're presenting is just the water aquatics park without any additional park area attached to it?
yeah, that would be just for the water park or for the aquatic center itself.
Okay.
So it wouldn't incorporate any other park amenities. As we start doing some site plans and talking to landowners and working through that, that would be an option that we could talk about as far as adding park amenities.
I think we got to think, I think you've talked about it. And I think as you keep presenting this, we need to keep thinking about beyond just the water aquatics park and what else should be around it for city options and citizen options. Thanks.
100%.
Go ahead.
For all the reasons that Steve mentioned, I'm a fan of B. But as we go through this further analysis, if all of a sudden there were some emergent positive influences being recognized for the project, I could get really warm about A, but I'm for today B.
Did you have one that you were in favor of?
Well, I mean, A, but being responsible, although I kind of feel like we're in this, like, when I want something, this is public, so well, he knows it. So I say to my husband, if I want this, I present this and I present this and I end up here and then, we're in the middle. But so B, I appreciate the fact that expansion or something new, that it provides space, that if that new fun thing comes along, that we have that. I mean, I think people like wave pools, but I don't know that it's as important when you look at the overall scope of the other activities that are involved in there. And I also, just as a side note, I did find it interesting on that tour that they told us that their #1 rescue pool is the kiddie pool. Just shockingly enough, it's not the big dangerous stuff that's coming out. It's the little kid pool, because the parents are comfortable. It's 3 feet. They think they're fine. And next thing you know, these kids are going down. So random as we're staffing. But so I B, but if there's a donor that wants to put maybe their name on a wave pool and that's there or something, then, I don't think we ever say no.
So maybe I can convince you to A, because I think I'm the outcast here, and I think we go big or we go home on this, and go with A. In fact, I think you kind of combine B and A and do the larger area with the A amenities. That way we can expand in the future to maybe, what did we see in Ankeny? We saw the surfboard thing simulator. Yeah, so add something like that, or whatever the new craze is in 2036. Because I see this as a regional draw. I see this as bringing tourism to Marion. I see it as if it's in an area where there's 30 acres and we're taking 15. The other 15 could be huge for commercial growth or another hotel or whatnot. I see it as a huge draw. So I think we should go with it all right off the bat. In fact, one of the reasons too is, the wave pool, you said that it might not be that big of a draw, but everywhere you go to Lost Island, you go to Wisconsin Dells, what's the busiest pool in all of the place you're at? It's the wave pool. That's where everybody goes. That's where everyone goes to, I'd say it's the biggest draw out of everything. And the lazy river. But because none of the places we toured had a wave pool when we were in Des Moines, no wave pools. So they wouldn't be able to compare that to a lazy river. What was the other point I was just gonna make? Cost. Yes, it does cost $3 million more to add that pool, that wave pool in 2026 dollars. But if you don't put that in 2026 and you do it in 10 years, let's say in 2036, what's the cost then? Is it gonna be 6 million? Is it gonna be 10 million? We don't know. So it's definitely would be cheaper to build it in the 2026 versus 2036. So.
Well, if there's a struggle with consensus, you know, this is just one of the steps too. So I mean, there's gonna be other things in here, specifically the funding plan, where that's gonna be provide a lot of information to council too, as far as when can we afford it and how can we afford it? So.
Grant.
Yeah, so Will, your comments, you know, I didn't dwell so much on the regional destination component, the, you know, economic impact that this potentially has, as well as, you know, fundamentally maybe paying for itself. I guess I'm going to change my answer, and I'm of the age I can do that. I favor A.
Any other comments, questions for Seth? Nope. All right. Thanks, Seth.
I get feedback or?
Well, you gotta.
It's still B. It's
Still B, yeah.
It's still B, but you know, I mean, to Seth's point, when we start running some of these different scenarios, especially from the financials, B has the larger area and it's planning for. So as we go through and we bring it back to council, it's certainly going to be able to quickly say, oh, well, what would it look like if? And then we can quickly run that scenario. So
one other thing too is this is going to go to a bond vote. So if we go to a bond vote and say, here's our $26 million plan and it passes, I mean, then we'll know that the citizens want us to go big with this. If it doesn't pass because it was too much, then we know, oh, we got to scale it down. So that's another thing that I thought of too, is we're going to know if they pass it or not.
and with the data that we'll provide as part of the follow-up, you'll have more information to really kind of determine the path and respond as this does go to referendum. So
thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next on the agenda is the discussion, and I got to put my glasses on. Direction regarding transit. Kesha.
Good after evening, council members, not even mayor. So we've kind of bringing you along. In November, we had discussions regarding transit, kind of like what do we currently have, right? And then there was also presentation from Horizons back in January. And at that time we were in the middle of a survey. So I thought Brian will expand on this, but first, just to kind of reiterate some of those transit survey responses that we did get back. There's been a lot of discussion since this, but what we did get back in January, we had the survey out for 2 to 3 weeks. We touched base with a number of different entities, communities, businesses that we anticipated might have transit users based on previous comments, based on previous phone calls to us as staff. And so with that transit survey, we did get 346 responses. 124 of those filled out paper surveys. And so those, we can say those were paper surveys handed out to people riding the bus. So we can say those specific ones were tallied up just to say this is our ridership right here. And another one is that 282 said that they had Marion zip code. And so just peace of mind, about 2/3 of the respondents actually live in Marion, whether or not they take the bus out of Marion or just solely within Marion, or interested in transit or the options before them. This isn't necessarily 282 riders from Marion. So next slide. Majority of the people don't ride the transit yet. Again, this is more of a, if you're interested in transit, right? This wasn't a requirement that you had to use transit. But the people who used it, I mean, you do see the majority shopping and groceries, right? Work, medical, you know, and school and other, it's social aspects, but it's kind of one of those unknowns, but just peace of mind of what that is. Work commute, just kind of that question of how many people are using this for working in kind of, you know, the highest is live in Marion, work outside of Marion, or they're retired. So this is, you know, either for social or, you know, using the bus for that type of activities. Live and work in Marion, I think, which is key, because some of the things that we discussed were, if we did like kind of a door-to-door option or a micro transit option, this is that saved me an hour on the bus and gets me where I need to go. So that's a big one that I kind of took away. A quarter of the respondents at least would cover that, and then live outside of Marion and work in Marion. There is an on-demand option. So Horizons does provide an after-hours service. It's a after-hours service, so it's higher cost. Majority of people weren't aware that there is even such a thing. So interesting, nonetheless. And then, so, you know, kind of getting that gauge of no, I want to stick with what I know and what is right. I can just hop on anytime at this set schedule. Or on demand is kind of interesting to me, or I'm open to either option. You know, I just really need transit. Just get me on that bus. The interesting thing is that the 124 respondents that were active bus users, those hard copies that I was talking about, 83% of those users said, I just want my fixed route, right? It's safe, it's convenient, it's, you know, the kind of the takeaway from that, I didn't have in there the question of how far do you walk? You know, so we don't have the convenience factor for some of this. So that's kind of a, if I could do it over, that's the one thing I'd ask type of thing. But then, I mean, so if you add up the interested in on demand and then open to either option, you've got kind of the majority of, you know, you've got that increased amount, you know, if you kind of take out the people who only prefer fixed route, there is still a good amount of response there for, I could do on demand. I could do either option, you know, so there is that openness there. So pretty excited, pretty happy about that. You know, it's not just only one way, but next slide. And then interest in on demand, you know, so some of the responses, again, keep in mind, this is everybody responding. This is not just the existing transit user. So you've got some of that response of like 64% said, I want to be picked up and I want to go anywhere in the metro area. Well, that might be a different ride share service than what Marion would do with public transportation, right? So, I mean, if you do want your Uber, if you do want your door-to-door anywhere in Lynn County, that might not be what you're kind of in for, right? And then again, you did see the range of options that people were willing to pay. But again, I think there's that assumption of, I'm going to get my own cab from here to there. So of course I'd be willing to pay like a couple bucks. So again, the assumption of what people were wanting might be a little bit different than what we're trying to provide. But it gives you, again, a good basis. And the results, the full results were included in the attachment of your packet. So you can see those. And then time you're willing to wait, right? And so originally we were thinking, if you would go with that on-demand option or that micro transit option, you know, hour of heads up for that. So you got to put in, like Sarah said, you know, you kind of lowball it, you kind of highball it, you're just somewhere in the middle, right? So it's just seeing what that 30-minute time frame was. Obviously that had a pretty good amount of responses, you know, dwindled down once you get to an hour, but I thought it was very surprising that 46% said, as long as I can schedule it, just give me my option to schedule it because I'm gonna need, I see that as someone who needs it Monday through Friday, set time, right? So as long as I can schedule it. So, and that's the last of the transit survey information. I would say of the paper copies, you did get those write-ins kind of on the side in the margins that said, please don't take away my transit, So I think that there's a huge need of people that says, this is my only way to get to work. This is my only mode of transportation. This is, so that was a lot of the comments that were in there. Just to add that in, when given that little bit of inch margin on the side, somebody's gonna write it in, and they did. They use that. So that's the existing transit users, just a little bit of feedback from that. So like I said, the full results are attached in your packet. And I'm gonna kind of hand it over to Ryan here, who's kind of come on board with transit in a very quick amount of time, and jumped in the pool with us, flippers on and everything. So not to play off of
Was it the wave?
Seth's, his deep end, jumped right in. So Ryan, if you want to take.
Thank you, Kesha, Mayor Pro Tem and members of council. So Kesha provided we wanted to close the loop on the survey results because when it was one of my first couple months when Horizons came in and presented this concept about microtransit, at that time we had the survey open. So we wanted to make sure we closed that loop with you in the community. Now, just kind of taking a little look backward, just kind of where we were, because that kind of sets the stage of where we're going, or where we'd like to go. It's my understanding prior to my arrival with the city, there were some conversations with Cedar Rapids, who's our transit provider, to expand service. And that's where they introduced us to Horizons and kind of did the handoff there. That's what led to the presentation from Horizons. Well, as we were getting further into our conversations with Horizons, we were approached by Lynn County, specifically Lynn County Lifts. They provide a paratransit service that is required as part of any sort of fixed route service. So Cedar Rapids Transit provides our fixed route, and then by federal law, they're required to provide that paratransit. Paratransit is for somebody that's disabled or needs to have special accommodations to get to and from. So it's sort of a micro transit option for those that need to go to doctor's appointments and things like that. Excuse me, things like that. So when we started hearing about this, we started reaching out to our partners at Cedar Rapids, Lynn County. We actually convened a meeting with all those parties, Lynn County Lifts, Cedar Rapids, our staff, to kind of talk and just let's get all the partners together and let's talk about data, let's talk about stats, and let's understand. Kesha has been very busy seeking data from Cedar Rapids, along with Lynn County, and just trying to dissect it. Horizons was at our meeting as well. And it was during that meeting that Cedar Rapids had proposed a revised 2080 agreement for the fixed route service. So originally it was about $535,000. During the meeting, they said, hey, look, it's $431,000. Now, the reason that they had indicated to us that when they provided that 535, it was an estimate at that time. They do get federal and state funding based on ridership. So when they came back and shared that revised number, they had indicated that they got some of the final dollar figures. So that's the revised number. And Terrell, next slide, please. So we had that meeting, and then as part of our education process, because we are not transportation experts, we do rely on Cedar Rapids and our partners to help us. Kesha wound up reaching out to Iowa DOT and had a meeting with them to learn more as best as she could, or bless you, as best as our team could, to understand a little bit more about what the requirements are. And really the feedback that we got from the state was, look, Cedar Rapids serves as sort of that regional transit provider here. We don't want to create a system where we got multiple transit. They used Iowa City, Coralville as an example of what not to do. And I don't mean that in a critical way, but it's just, you have a lot of different transit organizations that are competing for these dollars. It creates some efficiencies here for the riders. and just how they get to and fro. So, so we had that meeting with IDOT as well as the MPO. It's our understanding Cedar Rapids also had a very similar meeting with IDOT after we did. And really what they told us was Cedar Rapids is your transit provider. They should be working with you on coming up with a design that really meets the needs of the community. I think next slide, Terrell, please. So as we've gone through this education process, learning more about the data, learning more about the intricacies of how the funding works, talking to the folks at the state, we've had conversations with Horizons, with Lynn County, with Cedar Rapids Transit. What we are looking for is permission from the council to let's continue our relationship with Cedar Rapids via the 2080. We haven't, to my knowledge, we haven't had a contract in place for service like this before. So this would be something new. It would memorialize what it is, and then use this next year to really get all the partners together in the room and ask that Cedar Rapids work with Lynn County Lifts and Horizons to come up with some options that we can then take to the council and get some more clear direction on as we move forward, especially in light of the survey results. So that is what we are looking for. Did I miss anything? Tom, did I miss anything? Happy to answer questions.
Any questions, comments? Steve?
Yeah, I mean, I at this point, I completely agree with the overall direction. I think the $431,000 is less than the number we had in our budget. So the budget certainly accommodates that. I always felt that when we started talking about this, that if we were going to try to make a decision by July 1st, we were really going to be having to rush things and maybe not coming up with the best long-term solution. There's still is a need to widen and improve the availability of service to our city. So there's areas, we got one fixed route through the city. So we know as the city continues to grow and expand, there's a number of areas not getting serviced in the right way. So I was excited about the discussion about an alternative service, still am. But I like the fact that we're going to take some time to evaluate what the different options are out there. So I don't know where we'll end up, but I think what you're recommending makes a lot of sense. Still may have something different in the future, but yet let's pause, bring in the right people into those discussions and come up with the best solution for our citizens. So
one thing I forgot to add, and correct me if I misspeak, as part of the conversation with IDOT about this, about our relationship with Cedar Rapids Transit and Horizon, their feedback to us was really Cedar Rapids Transit should be the one that subcontracts with Horizons to provide that service in our area for the purpose of accessibility of funding, because that would increase the ridership, which then would increase the funding. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, and so the conversation with the DOT was pretty eye-opening of we would need to be a designated transit authority or agency to receive state or federal funding. And they're like, we're not interested in doing that. So again, it's just kind of like, okay, you need to work in the same sandbox as Cedar Rapids, which we have no problem doing, but it's just one of those things. It benefits them and ultimately us to have that ridership under their umbrella. They get the additional federal and state funds for those riders. If we go off on our own and do our own separate contract, that's a loss for everybody.
Grant next.
Yeah, I think having a stabilized service with Cedar Rapids for FY23 is the way to go. That then gives you the time to basically engineer ourselves into a more satisfying solution for the unmet needs. So I agree with this approach.
Sarah, and then
I might have missed this. Within that agreement, is there any conversation of expansion for different routes? Like, we've talked about getting up north a little bit or out east that's not met. So is that status quo
This,
dollar?
this is status quo, but as part of the conversation, assuming that what I'm hearing is the consensus is to proceed as we're recommending, we would work with Cedar Rapids and Horizons to bring up options on how to expand that service. And what would that look like? What would that cost? So we can have some conversations with the council, make sure that we're providing you with the data you need to make your informed decisions.
I think that's a critical part of this conversation with us moving forward with them is the consistent requests we've had to expand that route.
Colette.
So first and foremost, I think it's just really important to acknowledge the amount of work and research we've done to get here. I think that's really good, right? Talking to our Cedar Rapids partners and the state and doing our due diligence. Getting the survey results, I think, from our writers is really insightful. If they're willing to write on the side of the survey, it talks about how important that this is to them. So I want to acknowledge and celebrate the work that we've done. You have done, not we, right, to get us to this point, and support the idea of giving us this next fiscal year to figure it out and to do it right. So.
I agree with what everyone else has said too. And the fact that there's some definite need on the east side of the highway. So it'd be good to try and get that expanded over the next year. So
Thank you.
got what you need, right?
Yes, thank you.
All right, then we'll move on
Thank you.
to discussion and direction regarding truck routes. Mr. Barclow.
Yeah, so we brought this up a little bit when we did the overweight permits. So this is, now we're getting down to the dump trucks and the 53-foot semis, and where do we want those trucks in the city of Marion? So the resolution that we have was back in 2004, so it hasn't been addressed since then. Staff basically has two options that we have looked at. Option one is basically make our highways the truck routes and nothing more. The other one is actually go street by street. So for example, on our existing truck routes, we have 10th Street from 5th to 7th, 5th Avenue from 10th to 12th, 12th Street, 5th to 7th, 11th Street, 5th to Grand, East Post Road from Grand Avenue to the South City limits, and 44th Street from Highway 100 to 29th. So we could build off of that list, add and subtract. In your council packet, I did give a link to the Cedar Rapids truck routes. If you notice on those, there's basically two roads from Cedar Rapids that are designated truck routes that come into Marion. One is Collins or Highway 100, and the other is Business 151. Those are the only two roads that Cedar Rapids has as designated truck routes that enter into Marion. So thus coinciding with what we are recommending for option number one. But I wanted to open up to the council and get directions so that staff can proceed.
Grant.
So in your option one, Mike, you've got business 151. So that would bring truck traffic right into Uptown?
Yeah, and that could be one where you say you don't want it in business 151. It's just hard when Cedar Rapids has it on business 151 past Collins. So we got to do something with those trucks.
So would it be possible to open up business 151 with the exception of the immediate Uptown and have them go on 6th Avenue?
That's an option that we could look into.
I guess I'm just kind of sensitive to protecting that environment that is going to have a high pedestrian quotient as well as just the normal wear and tear that you know probably better than anybody else that heavy loads going to and fro will generate. So I guess as I just evaluated this, I like your option one with a variation on the theme of business 151, try to skirt around 7th Avenue.
In the Uptown.
Yes, in the Uptown. However that works.
Steve, go ahead.
Ditto what Grant said. I mean, for the same reasons. I mean, I thought about the same thing and I would not want, we can keep those larger trucks off of Seventh Avenue in the uptown area. Sixth Avenue is more desirable. It's more of a through street. Again, people have already been talking about if you park uptown, that it's already kind of a little tight, a little narrow. Now all of a sudden you got these big trucks going through there and people trying to get in and out of cars. I'd rather them be over on Sixth Avenue, which does not have those challenges.
Sure.
This may be bad. Business 151, Highway 151, where is you have it
What's the
listed.
difference?
What's the difference? Is it's listed as Business 151 and then Highway 151 is there, does it
13.
split?
13 is where it changes.
So to the east of town is 151.
151. Business 151 starts at Highway 13 going west,
East.
going
Well,
east.
business 151 west of 13, it's 151 east of.
Thank you.
So I like the idea too of, well, there goes a semi right now around 7th Avenue. Of detouring them onto 6th, roundabout to roundabout. But tell me, how are these brick streets gonna withstand being a truck route? Are they built for that?
I mean, there is concrete underneath the brick pavers, but they are clay brick, so they are gonna get busted up.
Yeah, I would think. I think I would be in favor of what they were saying also. So option 1 with moving on to 6.
And then just as a clarification, so everyone can hear it, that's in the public too, this doesn't mean that trucks are only gonna be on these roads. If you are a residential property, if I order a load of rock for my house, it gets to my house, it gets to go on the residential streets, but they're supposed to use the truck routes as much as possible before they exit the truck routes to get to those residential properties. So you're still gonna see the trucks in town, but they're supposed to be on the designated truck routes. So what we'll do is we'll modify the resolution and have that on, not Thursday, but we'll put it on the May meeting for a resolution.
Do you have to do anything with the DOT as far as making the truck route onto 6, since it's not technically on business 151 anymore?
We'll look into it, but technically how we do it is each year, they actually contact the city and ask what our designated truck routes are. And we automatically tell them that all permits have to go through us. Now, whether or not they actually get the permits is another story.
Gotcha. Okay. Anything else? All right. Thank you, Mike. We'll move on to presentation regarding the fiscal year 21-22 budget amendment. Got Brian coming up.
Good evening. This is a presentation for the fiscal year 21-22 budget amendment. So that is for this current fiscal year, not to be confused with all the work that we've been doing the past few months in the next fiscal year budget. So the first question is, why do we do a budget amendment? So the state requires that we do a budget amendment if we are looking to potentially be going over in any one of these functions. So our budget, the way that it's designed, is by fund and by department. But the state rolls that up to the function level. So as you can see, like public works, public safety, and so on. So as a department, we continue to analyze this as the year goes on. And we're thinking that we're probably not going to go over budget, but there's a couple of areas where we're close enough that we should warrant just doing a budget amendment to be fiscally conservative. So we do not get an audit finding, which is bad. Next slide. So just first of all, just a quick overview of where we're at with the general fund only. We are through the end of March for our financials, so roughly 75% if we take it there. So looking at that, we've expended 18.4 million on the general fund out of a 26.16. So we're at 72%. That's a very high overview level. In your pocket, you'll see a breakdown by department. So to highlight a couple of areas that are in this budget amendment and their percentages, we have the function public safety, which is made up of police, fire, communication center, animal control. We have police at trending at 76% of budget, fire 77, and then general government, which covers a lot of departments. We have a couple to note that City Hall's actually over budget right now, and then HR is 88%. Next slide. So when we get into the functions that we are looking to do an amendment for, just to note that last slide was general fund, but we have other funds that fall into those functions. The other main one is the equipment reserve fund. We have two main reasons that we would do an amendment. Typically for carryovers from the previous fiscal year, this is hopefully the end of the era of COVID, but with delays, ordering equipment, that kind of stuff, we see many carryovers. And then the other is a simple budget adjustment, things that were maybe brought forward that we look to do in the future, but we decided to bring that expense forward, or just unforeseen expenditures. So looking at public safety, one of the main reasons that we're close to budget is the new fire station. There was a delays in the construction of the headquarters. Most of the stuff that hit the general fund was for the furniture, the equipment to equip the fire station. So we had some delays. So those expenditures were not expected in fiscal year 22. So those are there. The adjustment, and then there's some other vehicles there also, again, carryovers. The adjustments, the vehicles is actually a net zero revenue expenditure. One was a donation for the canine unit, and the other was a vehicle in an insurance claim. So net zero, there's revenues to offset the expenditures, but as far as the state's concerned, it's the expenditure line item, but if we're over budget there, that's all they look at. So next slide. And then general government was mainly some strategic plan initiatives that we decided to move forward. And then also the former city manager recruitment, we hired a consultancy service to find that replacement. And so those were some unforeseen expenditures. So the total adjustment there is 127,446. Next slide. So transfers is not actually a designated function as far as the state's concerned, but it is good budgetary practice if we're doing this budget amendment to look at if there's any transfers that we had not accounted for. Transfers are kind of a different animal because the council, and this was a fairly recent adjustment to state code, but the council has to approve every single transfer by resolution before we do it. So you guys will see any transfer anyway as a separate resolution. But we decided for this budget amendment, we are, that's that K9 vehicle that was also in the previous public safety. That's because a donation has to go into special revenue, and then we'll transfer that out to the general fund where we make the expenditure. The other transfer that we're pulling forward, it was, we were planning to do it in fiscal year 23, but during the budget process, we did pull it forward into fiscal year 22, which was a derecho transfer from the general fund to the capital projects. So as you may have been aware, I think Ryan announced this in his in focus, that our local share now is looking like it's zero. So it was 15%. Now it's zero, but that's not to say that we're completely out of the water. We're doing our due diligence. We still have FEMA reimbursements to receive. So we have already transferred money this fiscal year already for our local share. but we're going to continue with this plan. And just because of cash flow purposes, we need that money in the capital projects fund. So we're going to continue our plan, and then once we see where we land, then we will make the other funds true when we do our analysis for the big picture. Next slide. And then the capital projects here, this actually is not going to be a state amendment. This is an internal budget adjustment that we would like to do purely for administrative efficiencies. The finance department needs to look at everything that looks over budget in the system, and we do overrides. And with the capital projects, with the timing of projects, that can happen kind of early in the fiscal year, sometimes if there's timing issues. So this is just an internal adjustment. These two projects have not gone over budget as a whole, but they carry over multiple fiscal years. So it's just a timing of expenditures where we didn't quite spend as much as we thought last year. We're spending more this year. So this is just an internal net zero adjustment. So then we don't have to do budget overrides all the time in our system. So next slide. So this is just a presentation to keep you up to speed. The next steps are similar to the actual budget process. We will publish a notice of public hearing. That will go out in between this meeting and the next council meeting, and then there'll be a public hearing held on May 5th. And then if there is a consensus, we move forward with the adoption of this budget amendment. I'm open to questions.
Questions, Grant?
Brian, first off, I want you to know I'm amazed at the work that you all do to track our very large budget and all of its complexity. I'm just constantly amazed at the detail that you manage on behalf of the city. Just a general question. Is a portion of this adjustment being caused by the fact that we have suffered increasing costs on various items, various projects, that whether they be pandemic induced, supply chain induced, whatever external forces that we have to respond to? Is that, I guess I'm stating an assumption, but is that a true assumption?
This amendment has a large portion to do with carryovers.
Okay.
The adjustments, like I said, there are some strategic plan initiatives that we move forward. I wouldn't say it's because of a huge increase in costs that we're incurring.
Okay.
Not to do with this budget amendment, no.
The basis of my question was to try to, understand the magnitude of those external things. So that you're saying that's minimal, and it's mostly just for the transfers that need to be made based on timing related issues.
Yes, and so carryovers is a thing that we deal with every single year. So then we'll have them in fiscal year 23. We are continuing to monitor. Like I said, we don't actually foresee going over budget in any function because you have each department obviously manage their own budget. They actually come to us with a list that they can speak to, that they're maybe over budget in a certain line item. So yes, to your point, there may be some increased costs operationally in their line items, but as a department, they're doing their due diligence around trying to manage those increased costs and offsetting them in other places in their budget. So they're all doing a great job there. So as an overall picture, but yes, there is an impact at the small line item level, but overall they are responsible for managing their budgets as a whole department.
Okay, thank you.
If I could just add a little bit, just to give you more of a full picture. When you ask about those implications, I think when we're looking at it at a high level, it's really hard for us to say yes, because the other side that you're not seeing is we're not talking about where are we under budget. Are we under budget because we have staff vacancies? And that's offsetting, and that's part of why. And are we still attending trainings in person or not? So I would say there actually is a lot more impact than is maybe being presented in this budget amendment due to COVID for sure, as far as the implications of in person or not, and just what's going on in the labor market, as well as the supply chain issues that Brian already mentioned.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Brian? No? All right, thank you. And the last discussion and direction regarding proposed recruitment policy. And we're over time. Sorry, maybe we don't even talk about it now.
Ready, break.
What do we got talking about this?
I can be quick. I
Kirsten,
can be
go ahead.
quick. As you guys know, recruitment continues to be a challenge, and finding that top talent is a top priority for us. So we wanted to bring council along and let you know kind of some things we were thinking about, some strategies we were looking to implement to combat this. The last time I checked, the last figure was in March of this year. Unemployment is 3.3%. What that means is that everybody that wants a job has a job, and we need to find ways to target those passive candidates and people that aren't necessarily looking for a job. As you're aware, Ryan has implemented coffee talks, and he got some really great feedback and ideas on things we can do, and we're considering those. In speaking with Chief Kitzmiller recently, one of the things we talked about that I've done in the private sector with some pretty great success is implementing an employee referral program, whereby we reward employees who refer candidates, and they have a successful, duration of employment. There's certain parameters around it. Certainly, the leadership team, anyone that would influence a recruitment process would not be eligible to receive that payment. The HR manager would not be eligible. So there's definitely parameters around that. And also, depending upon the position, that could change the amount of I'm going to call it bonus. Our employment council would not be happy that I was calling it a bonus, because it's not, but it's a payment. That would change the amount of the dollar amount. And again, the duration. So for example, seasonals that we need to, work a 90-day term, maybe we would do a $50 amount for that. But in speaking with Chief Kitzmiller, we were talking about a lateral figure for a lateral transfer, doing $1,000, half of which would be paid upon hire, and the other half would be paid after 6 months of successful employment. So again, the program, it would be generic. It'd be kind of an umbrella program. And then depending on the business need, hard to fill positions, we would pivot, again, the dollar amount and things like that. So I don't know, Ryan, if you wanted to comment, or Chief, if you wanted to chime in. The money would come from the department budget for awareness, but I don't know if you wanted to chime in.
I just, again, I mean, we had conversations about attraction and retention. It's a tough environment now. And so I applaud the team for trying to think outside the box of doing something a little bit creative and really use our existing resources, our current team members, to go out, reach out to the people that they know, reach out, our officers go on traffic stops and help out Cedar Rapids officers, maybe through the course of conversing, they can, hey, come on, join Team Marion. And, it gets them to think about touting us as an opportunity a little bit more. And again, just trying to do something creative in this really tough environment. So I applaud the team. Thanks to Chief Kitzmiller for bringing this up and working with Kirsten on getting this as a program. The agenda is a little misleading. I mean, we're calling it a program right now. What we want to do is, as we work on Kara and HR, working on updating our policy document, eventually wrap all of this into the overall policy. But right now, I just wanted to kind of share what we're doing. And Chief, if you have anything else you want to add.
I think for us, it's just a good way of the officers know what we're looking for. And if they vouch for somebody, that means something. Believe it or not, having a good looking chief is not a bigger recruitment tool as you would imagine. So anything we can do to improve in that area, I'm all for it. Kirsten's got that corporate background, and she brought it up, and I thought, hey, this is a great idea. Let's give it a shot. So
I would just add that typically, first of all, I think that we all need to have our recruiter hats on all the time. Whether you're at a restaurant or a bar, refer people our way. Employee referrals typically make the best employees. People are hesitant to refer someone that's not going to be successful. So
Are we separating this discussion between like police, the police one, and then the referral on general?
So there's an overarching employee referral program, and it just happens to be that the chief has an immediate need. So this will be a variation of the employee referral program policy. Does that make sense?
Kind of, because when I look at this, I'm like, I totally understand that with police and fire, I'd say the same thing. The hard to hire positions. When I look at it though, in practicality from an organization that pays nonprofit wages and has to find people in creative ways. My question is, so if I'm an employee and I refer my child to a summer job, do I get a bonus?
As counsel?
Well, no, if I'm
just,
okay,
we would
if I'm
announce it. We would announce it. So it's not a standing fee. It would be on, very specific duration. So for the next 45 days, if you refer a police officer, this is the dollar amount associated with it. Does that mean?
It does, but I'm gonna put police over here because I totally get that. Whatever needs to be done. I'm going back over here because you brought up, what if we need seasonal parks or seasonal whatever? So if you're saying, if they have to be A, employed and it's seasonal, how could they be there for 6 months? And B, can I employ my child as a summer employee and do I get a bonus for doing it? Not as a council member, but if I were if I was.
Not you.
Right, if I'm a team member here at Team City of Marion and I refer my child to apply for a summer job, do I get a bonus?
So those parameters will change depending upon the position. So that the dollar amount for the bonus will change depending upon, I was paying $25,000 for a software engineer. So it just, the harder to find positions may get a higher dollar amount. The duration that the window's open to refer people will change. And then the 6 months employment, the contingencies around the employment would change again. To your point, they're not going to be here 6 months if it's for a seasonal position. So those would all change.
And just if I'm hearing the question correctly, we would implement a referral program for other positions as the need presents itself. So if we are not having difficulty getting lifeguards seasonal, this is just a tool in the toolbox that we can take out if we're experiencing some challenging times, or if we know, like police and fire, we've got some, it's a really tough industry to recruit for. We would take that out of the toolbox and deploy that tool.
It's more of a, if needed, we can use this. It's not a standing implementation
Correct.
of a consistent policy until suddenly there's a change in the workforce demands of basically the country.
Exactly. Position specific as needed.
If I may add to that a little bit, I'm kind of newer involved in the conversation. And so one of the ideas that I have not floated past Ryan yet, but I floated past Kirsten incredibly recently, is that when we draft the policy, giving that a very general authorization, the city manager has the authority and the discretion to implement. And then it's sort of like we do our table of fees, where we authorize that by ordinance, but then we approve the table of fees by resolution. This would be a policy that authorizes the program, but then each time we wanted to implement that, we would have a specific set of rules, duration, amount, who's eligible, that sort of thing.
That answer your question though about my kid getting hired. So let's say someone who works as a patron service at the library and their child is getting a job, seasonal job, and we're having problems getting seasonal help. So you implement it for seasonal help. Is that patron services employee going to get a bonus because they're
The family member.
as a family
Sure.
member? Okay.
Yeah, refer friends, family, neighbors. Yeah, as long as they're a successful employee.
Any other questions? So are you looking for direction to see if we're
This one is, this does not need direction. We're just want to make sure you are all are aware as we're trying to do. I mean, we want to keep the topic of recruitment and retention in front of you as well as the public because it is challenging. But we will be bringing this eventually at some point when we get our policy document. It will be wrapped in there, at which point the council will formally approve it. But this can fit within the budget and it's not, we're not talking major dollars here.
Then we'll move on. Oh, we're going to the closed session. Mr. Harper.
Thank you, Your Honor. I move to adjourn to closed session regarding personnel matters as permitted under section 21.51I of the Code of Iowa.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to adjourn to closed session regarding personnel matters as permitted under section 21.51I, the Code of Iowa. Can we have a legal statement, please?
Thank you, Your Honor. I have reviewed the proposed subject matter for the closed session and find the same to be appropriate under Iowa Code section 21.51I.
Thank you. And any discussion on this? No. All right, roll call vote.
Mr. Harper,
Yes.
Mr. Jensen,
Yes.
Ms. Atkins,
Yes.
Mr. Brandt,
Yes,
Ms. Menzer.
Yes.
we are adjourned to closed session now. Thank you. Mike's on down there too.